Ladies and gents, boys and girls, pronouns of your choosing, welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. It is great to see you. It's great to have your ears with us once again. Hope you're well. Hope you've had a fantastic day. We have got a great episode for you. My guest today is Gary Chamberlain. Now, we entitled this episode Not Easily Swayed, and I did so because Gary has got some very strong and passionate opinions about the fire service. He's a martial artist and he survived 31 years in the UK fire service. But before we jump in there, let's hear from our Firefighters Podcast family. A big thanks once again to our partner Blue Light Card. Now, Blue Light Card, they work to recognise the hard work and commitment of those individuals carrying out some of the most important jobs in our community by offering members an amazing selection of online and in-store discounts at over 15,000. That's right, 15,000 commercial partners across the UK. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, that's right, we are heading into summer, and Blue Light Card has just launched a new campaign helping all of its members get ready for summer. It's got some epic discounts on fashion, must-haves, garden staples, holiday essentials, keep you looking and feeling your best for less. My partner is never one to miss a saving, so we've been kitting ourselves out and kitting the kids out and utilising all of the discounts on Blue Light Card to do exactly that, getting those holiday essentials ready to get out of the UK as soon as we're able to, and we're even booked in to go down to some of the lovely little coastal villages around the UK. So we've got to make sure we've got those must-haves. And even if you're just kitting out the house, you're getting the chairs, you're getting the covers, you're getting the barbecues, you're decking out your garden ready for that summer. Blue Light Card has got so many amazing discounts to help you make sure you get exactly what you want and are still making that saving. So get over to bluelightcard.co.uk and find out how you can save on those summer months. Dressing sharp, looking good, looking classy, in comfort, and getting yourself ready for summer. A massive thank you to William Wood Watches, a long-term partner of the podcast. Now, I'm a massive fan of this brand. I've had my Valiant watch now for probably 2 years, and I get so many mentions on it. If you're somebody that's into their firefighting history, if you're somebody that likes something classy, something sharp, but also something functional, then you've got to head over to williamwoodwatches.com. If you're an emergency services geek, you love your fire service memorabilia, the authenticity that's behind this brand is absolutely incredible. It's all based around the owner, Johnny, and his grandfather, who was in the fire service for 25 years. He won commendations for his bravery and passed away, after which Johnny started the brand, and this is now the legacy of his grandfather. One of the really memorable acts of William Wood was actually on the 29th of June 1966, when he and 3 fellow firefighters saved 5 small children aged between 5 and 1 from a severe house fire. And you feel that a lot when you look at the watches. For example, the straps. I mean, that's always the one that really gets the mention when people see it and they go, hey, that's such a unique piece. The red fire hose that I have on my straps are made from hose used by the London Fire Brigade. That iconic red strap comes from hose that's been in the service for a minimum of 10 years. I'm talking stuff that's getting thrown down the street at road traffic collisions, it's getting hauled up the side of buildings. You know, it's actually been in there in the thick of it. And you can see this on the markings as well. Mine's got some black markings around the edging of it, where it's obviously been impregnated with a chemical of some form at some point on an incident. You know, it's actually been out there on the front line. But I mean, they've also got it in the yellow, the green, the blue. So no matter what watch you belong to at your service somewhere across the world, you can make it personal to you. Now, the Valiant collection I've got is such a stunning piece. It's got the Super Luminova on all the dials, so day or night you'll still be able to see what you're doing, still glance at it on the middle of the night at a job and still get the time. I was also surprised when I was swimming at night the other week that obviously it works underwater as well. Even down to the small things. You glance on the side of the watch, you've got the British brass firefighter's helmet. It's been sort of melted down and carved into the side of it. It's such craftsmanship. I absolutely love it. Bigger than all of that, it's just the story behind it. It's a perfect thing for a Christmas or a birthday gift for any firefighter or lover of the emergency services. It is the perfect gift. Now, I know I keep banging on about my Valiant, but they've also got the Bronze Edition, the Chivalrous, and earlier this year they brought out the Triumph collection. This one was an absolute game changer, a stunning timepiece. So head over and check them out. I think they're running a 10% discount at the moment, so get straight over there. WilliamWoodWatches.com, an incredible partner of the podcast. Also want to give a shout out to our media partners, the Emergency Services Times and the Emergency Services Show. We're also working in line with the Cheshire Fire Challenge and the British Firefighter Challenge. Competition's back on in the UK towards the end of 2021. All the details are in the notes for the show. And that's the names in the frames for today's episode, folks. So in today's conversation, you might hear some loose conversation. You might hear some words used that perhaps don't usually show up in certain episodes. I would ask you to listen to this with the sincerity of acknowledging Gary was in the fire service in a very different time. Banter was very strong. The culture was very strong. And tough times created tough firefighters. But if you can have a good sense of humor about you, which we often speak about in this episode, and see the forest through the trees, there's some fantastic lessons to be learnt from some of the stories, some of the opinions, some of the thought processes, and some of the experience that Gary shares with us on today's episode. A big thanks and respect to all of the people that are joining us on this journey. So again, before we jump in there with Gary, do not listen on if you are easily offended. This one is not for the faint of heart. And through this conversation, I try and position myself as the bridge between the past and the present, trying to navigate through and take away some of the fantastic values and morals and the lessons learned from 31 years in the UK Fire Service that Gary's going to share with us today. There really is some wonderful messages here. I'm so thankful for Gary spending time with us, and I'm so thankful for him feeling able to be open about some of the things he shared today. So thanks for dropping by. Thanks for lending us your ears for another great episode. Let's buckle up for safety, and I will see you on the other side. There he is.
How are you, Pete? You all right?
Yes, brother. How are you?
Not too bad. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you perfectly, my good man.
I'm not very good on this technology business.
I love your honesty. How are you, mate? You okay?
Yeah, fantastic. Not bad.
Good.
Not bad for an old fella.
For an old fella. Age is, it's all about perspective, I suppose, isn't it? You know, because you'll be old in comparison to one person, but young in comparison to... How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 65.
65? Crikey.
I only look 64 though. So
65 years young. So you've still got another 15, 20 years to make a difference, brother.
Right. I was just saying I want to get to 81 because then I've had more years out of the pension fund than I paid into it.
You know what? That'll be an interesting thing. I'd actually love to talk to you about it when we sort of get started.
As you say, you can edit stuff out. Right? Mm-hmm. I do tend to swear, especially when I'm talking about the fire brigade. I don't know why my head just comes back into fire brigade speak. Some of my ideas are probably old-fashioned. It might be a bit controversial in today's touchy-feely climate. I'm not one of these safe space type of people. I've got no filters really. I tend to just blurt stuff out as I think it. Some of the I'm not one of these for going on station. I've never been one of these saddos that's got nothing to do. So, but occasionally I'll bump into people that I used to work with, and we always sort of have 5 minutes, have a chat. The general feeling is we had the good times. Like I joined in the 70s. I served obviously till 2006, and the general consensus is that the 70s, the 80s were brilliant.
Glorious.
90s, things started to go a bit health and safety mad. In the 2000s, things started to get PC mad. You couldn't say this, you couldn't say that, you couldn't tell a joke. They tried to sack a couple of people for telling jokes, for God's sake. So the character of the job changed. So my character is still firmly in the way I was taught, the way I was groomed in the 70s.
And there's bits of that I want us to go into as well. In our sort of conversations leading up to our chat today, we ended up sort of arriving on the title of Not Easily Swayed. And it came from when you finished in the fire service. For people that are unaware, you did 31 years in the UK Fire Service, and your not retirement and or sort of leaving letter that you received from your chief had some really, really interesting choice terms and descriptions, some backhanded compliments, and also some nods to a previous mindset of how the fire service came to be this wonderful thing that we place on a pedestal in the community. On top of that as well, you're now a published author, and you're also a martial artist, and we've had a few martial artists on the podcast, and I wanted to bring you on because, with the greatest of respects to people that aren't, I'm not a martial artist, but being a martial artist comes with an air of credibility that you have a great deal of self-awareness and discipline. So sort of brings all those things into play. 31 years ago, you started the fire service. How did that come about?
Well, it was 46 years ago, to be honest. I've been retired for 15 years. At the time, I'd left home under a bit of a cloud. I didn't get away with my father for various reasons that pretty irrelevant to go into. But basically, at 17, I had to leave home, and I just took any job I could. And then we had a time in the UK which was called the winter. It was just before what's called the winter of discontent, but there was a lot of trouble with unions and all the rest of it. And basically, we went on to a 3-day week. As a coincidence, at the time, the fire service was recruiting because they were changing from a 48-hour week to a 56-hour week to a 48-hour week.
Yeah.
So they're taking more blokes on. Now, because the factory where I worked was down to 3 days, I couldn't afford to live on what I was earning.
No.
My instructor at the time, a bloke called Pete Kisby, was in the fire service.
Is that
and he
Steve's
just
dad?
said, well, yeah, Steve's dad, yeah. He was my karate instructor at the
Oh
at the
my
time.
God. Wait till I speak to Steve. Love it.
I know,
Sorry,
yeah.
Please carry on.
So I was only 18. I mean, I was still a kid. I was 10 and a half stone. I wasn't very mature. Bit of a twat. I wasn't very hopeful. I went for the interview, you know, I sort of like dressed up and all the rest of it. And it always makes me laugh when I talk to people trying to get in the job now. I mean, the hurdles they have to jump now. So I turned up at Central Station and there was a great officer there called Stretch Warden, old Stretch as we call him, John Warden. And he sort of like greeted us as we came in. Me and a bloke called Bob Bateman, he was on the same school. And all I had to do at my physical test was to get Bob Bateman on my shoulders, carry him the length of the drill yard, swap over, and then he carried me back. Okay, you'll do.
That was a physical testing.
That was the physical test. So none of this bleep test or, you know, none of this climbing ladders and leaning back. None of that at all.
Okay.
That was your basic physical test. Then we were took into workshops and we had to sort of like disassemble and assemble some basic kit. But the kit then was more primitive. It was designed to be idiot-proof, so I was well qualified.
So they still did the dexterity tests and stuff like that. So there was a little bit of, so there was some.
There was a little bit. I think I had to strip down a Leicester branch and put it back together or something like that. I don't even know if you still use Leicester branches, but
no, we haven't still got them in. But yeah, there was only about 6 or 7 components to it, wasn't there?
Yeah, they weren't particularly complicated. I was in engineering at the time, so it was busman's holiday really. But the key thing was, I mean, I still remember this, and you know, forgive me if it still sort of like brings a lump to my throat, really. I went to see a man who, in my opinion, was probably the best officer I served under, a bloke called Jack Tansley, and his legend's well known. JJ, everybody used to call him. Very hard man, but an extremely good officer. I went to see him, turned up, 18 years old, you know, wet behind the ears, really, you know, and after the usual sort of generic sort of questions, it wasn't like today where you've got like a certain pro forma that you go for an interview. There was just several questions he asked, you know, are you bothered by blood? No, I used to help out on a farm slaughtering pigs. Blood doesn't bother me at all. Bothered by heights? And I had to sort of like be a bit cagey there. I said, well, I used to work on a farm stacking haystacks and stuff like that. Didn't really bother me that much. But then, to be honest, if I'd have fell off a haystack or I'd have fell onto hay,
yeah,
bit different to climbing up a TL and falling onto concrete.
I always have this when people talk about vertigo, because I'm like, I'm definitely not afraid of heights, but I do get very aware of how high I am when you're, you know, when you're standing at the edge of a factory building 4 stories up and you're just having a glance over for spread with a thermal imaging camera, whatever you like. And you just get very, when you feel that wind and you're like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm very high up here. I'm very aware of how high I am, but people can, a lot of people struggle with heights.
I mean, I'll come back to that in a minute if you like. I mean, just to finish up on the interview, Jack Tansley, some people didn't like him. I mean, he had high standards, and if they weren't prepared to make an effort to reach those standards, they probably found him a bit strict or whatever. But in the interview, Jack Tansley turned around to me and said, well, what do your parents think about you joining the fire brigade? And I wasn't giving him a sob story or anything. I'd just say, well, unfortunately, I don't live at home anymore. And he looked a bit sort of quizzical at it. And I said, well, no, I had to move out. I had a bit of a row with my father. I had to move out. But straight away, he said, well, you've got a new family now.
Wow.
And I thought that was great. You know, I mean, he obviously saw something. I'm not saying he's super perceptive or whatever, but he saw a need there, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Here's this young lad, quite enthusiastic, quite keen, quite fit, wants to do the job. And like I say, you know, you've got a new family now. And I joined December the 16th, beg your pardon. Yeah, December the 16th, 1974. Very different then, very different fire brigade. The kit was more primitive, but the atmosphere on station, totally different to what you see now.
Yeah, I think what we lacked in kit, we made up for in culture and character. And there was a lot, you know, the idea of the old sweat on the watch and the social accountability, if you will, sort of holding each other to a higher standard, really, really made it what it was. Yeah,
when I joined on D section at Central Station after I'd been through the training school. We've still got people there who'd served in the Second World War. Chap called Jack Nutt. I mean, it made me laugh if you line up for parade, you know, like an officer would come in with his long service medal proudly displayed, you know. Jack Nutt had got the real thing, you know, he's got like campaign medals, you know, he'd been through the war, you know.
He'd been there and done it.
Yeah, he'd been there and done it, got blood on the T-shirt. So I was very lucky because I had some real good mentors in the job. I mean, mentoring now, people talk about mentors as if it's some kind of pop psychology or whatever. What I mean is blokes who told me how to behave, what was expected, pushed you when you needed pushing, but at the same time let you let off a bit of steam as well. I was talking the other day about the atmosphere on station. I mean, I can always remember if you went covering or anything, turned up at an unfamiliar station. We used to jump in a brigade van, an old escort van, go over to Oakham or wherever for a cover duty.
Yeah.
The first thing you heard when you walked through the door of a fire station, and I've been all over the world now, I've been to Russia, America, Japan, it's the same, all over the world. First thing you hear when you walk through the door, you hear blokes somewhere having a laugh.
Yeah, baby.
And that's how it used to be, and there used to be a great sub-officer at Oakham called Dave Tibbets, and he said, he didn't say it directly to me. I mean, I've just heard it secondhand. We're here for two things. Number one, help the public. Number two, have a fucking good time while we're doing it.
Oh, yes, brother.
And that was brilliant. That was just the atmosphere on station. When I was posted to D section, it was a different system then because the sections sort of overlapped. Instead of having watches, you had sections. So one day it'd be like A and B, the next day it'd be B and C, next day C and D. Okay. So you work with more people, if you like. There was a core number that you work with on your section. First day on, you work with the previous section. The second day on, you work with. So there was a little bit more sort of overlap of sections. I had two really good station officers. A bloke called Stretch Warden, who I mentioned earlier. He was brilliant. He was the fireman's fireman. It was the absolute epitome of the fire service. There was nothing. There was no machine you could go to. No piece of kit you could take off that he couldn't tell you everything about it. He was 100% fire service. Ended up working with his son, Alan Ward, also called Stretch. These things used to run in families. I think these days, if you've got a family member in the fire service, it's almost a disadvantage when you go to interview because they're so worried about nepotism and all the rest of it.
Yeah. But I sometimes think you get more for your money because there's a certain aspect of, we've said about character building and stuff like that, that's come in that nature nurture. The hope is they'll already have certain values and certain morals embedded within them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they probably understand the job. They've been on station since they were kids. But Stretch Warden was great, and the other station officer I had was a bloke called Bryn Evans. He was a former Royal Marine, and he was another tough guy. He was quite
those boys
small,
don't mess about, do they?
No, that's right. It was quite diminutive. His stature was only about 5'8" or something like that. He wasn't physically imposing, but he had a great way of running the watch. As an officer, he was absolutely spot on it. As an 18-year-old kid, I thought some of his attitudes were a little bit rigid, a bit inflexible. Obviously, kid, you're still a kid. You just want to mess around a bit. But professionalism, training, the way things had to be done, he got it dead right. Yeah. In my opinion, looking back, I was very, very lucky to be on his watch because the training was really, really good. I mean, we were well trained. I could talk about training as long as you like. It's a lifetime interest for me. But
I think it's fascinating and the different concepts for it. I wanted to sort of pick up on what you've said there because I hear a lot of aspects of discipline in that. And discipline has been given a lot of negative connotations in the past sort of 10 years or something like that. And I'm massive on personal discipline, whether it's ice baths, whether it's my training, whether it's the way I behave around my family, my children, my addictions that I've overcome, stuff like that. And I try and say to new recruits now that, because when they say, oh yeah, but so-and-so, and you'd flip your lid if you heard this sort of stuff, so-and-so on the watch doesn't have to do it, and they've been in 20 years or whatever. And I always try and articulate to them, look, there's freedom in discipline, which sounds like an oxymoron, but when you've demonstrated the discipline, when you understand the strategy, the tactics can be flexible. Yeah, how we go about it. Every job is different. Yeah, every incident is different. Yeah, the kit might not be there, it might not be working or whatever. So then you can be flexible. But for now, we need to be rigid. Okay, it has to be rigid for now. And I hear that when you speak about your old officers and your old sub officers. It seems at the time we feel a little bit like we're being oppressed when we're like, oh, it's so rigid, it's so rigid. But there's freedom in the discipline. Do you feel any of that when you look back now?
I certainly do. I mean, we used to drill. I mean, the system we used was drill, test, adjust. So we drilled. Well, the drill was very different to now. I mean, like I said earlier, I don't hang around fire stations. I mean, I've passed that phase of my life. But where I live, I quite often drive past a fire station. Of course, you glance across. And I mean, no disrespect at all. I mean, but times change. You see blokes shuffling around on the drill yard looking a bit bored. You see them carrying ladders at walking pace. You see them all standing around while somebody explains the finer points of some intricate piece of kit. We didn't have that. We didn't have that at all. The kit was fairly basic, and we ran. We ran when we did drill. Mm. When you're on the drill yard, you were moving. We drilled at what we call 5 gram pace.
Yeah.
And there's a very good concept in martial arts, which is you have to train how you're going to fight. You know, you can't train at 50% and expect to fight at 100%. It just doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. You know, you can probably train at 80%, so you're not getting injured, you're not getting hurt, but you've got to be somewhere near the level of intensity.
I totally agree with you. It's a smaller margin to shift when the moment comes, isn't it? You know, like you say, we're not trying to encourage people to injure themselves, but it doesn't need to be that much of a step change when you step into the real environment. It needs to be almost like you've been drilling at that pace. That's how the pace you've been doing it at.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we used to, I don't know if they still do this in the fire service, obviously I've not been on station for a while, but we do the basic drills. Every drill session would start off with probably Q&As or locker drill. So you line up in fire kit, and Bryn Evans was 0830 fire kit drill. It never varied. It didn't matter what the weather was. It didn't matter if it was pissing down outside, snow, ice on the drill yard, because he just said, well, we get fires when there's snow and ice.
Yeah.
You know, we still get incidents. We're going to go to the motorway.
Guys. Your skin's waterproof. Get out there. You'll be fine.
That's right. You know, we're going to go on the motorway. You know, there's been a multiple because there's been ice on the road. You know, we've still got to do the job. So we need to train in that environment. No, not like today. Oh, God, it's raining. Let's get everybody indoors and do a tabletop exercise or something. So we used to drill a lot. Now, we go to an incident, and I have to say things went really slick because we were busy. I mean, like at the time we had 5,000 calls a year. Now, obviously, not on duty for all of those, but Central Station at the time had 5,000 calls a year. So if you divide that by 4 and say that's what each watch gets, we were going to a lot of house fires.
Oh, yeah.
We had an ET on station. We were going to a lot of RTCs, a lot of special services. We were busy. But we'd go to a house fire, for argument's sake. We'd come back, somebody'd get a brew on, somebody make cobs if it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and we'd have a fairly sort of like, not rigid, but we'd have a fairly involved debrief. You know, right, what did you do? Well, I shipped the hydrant. Okay, did you find it all right? Oh, yeah, you know, I had to look for it. Okay, great. What did you do? I wore BA. How did you find it? Well, it was all right, but the hose reel got stuck on the stairs. We were quite honest and open about what happened.
You only find that in quite open teams as well. You only find that in teams where, you know, being honest like that, otherwise people can get defensive. It's better if you can just own up to things yourself.
There was no bullshit at all because people would, you know, would jump on it. If you try to pull the wool over people's eyes, honesty was important because that's how you improve. So we'd have these debriefs. Now, let's say for argument's sake, I mean, I noticed this the other day. I'm going off at a bit of a tangent now. I was driving along and I saw 2 pumps pull up and I saw smoke coming out the back of the house, and I'm not one of these idiots who think I can help out or something like that. I mean, like, they just think, who are you old twat? Bugger off. But I noticed there was plenty of room for the appliances to pull up. There's plenty of room. There was no space restrictions on the appliances at all. The lead appliance had pulled up about 30 yards past the front door of this particular house. Now, I don't know if that's a procedure now. I don't know. Maybe some windows are blown out and they've decided that they have to pull up far away for safety reasons, don't they? But we used to train, certainly when we got high-pressure hose reels. If you were driving the first pump and you were going to provide the BA and all the rest of it, if it was possible, if you had the space, you would pull up and line up your hose reel locker with the sort of entrance to
the front door,
the house, you know, with the door. So basically, the BA bloke's got off, probably half rigged already if you knew it's the person's reported. They grab the hose reel, check for water, you've done your breathing check, boom, you're in. And there's no fucking about with hose getting entangled in cars. This incident I drove past, they were trying to get the hose reel off, and there was this little girl, bless her, I mean, she was trying to pull the hose reel off, and she was struggling like hell because by this time, the branch man, as we used to call it, the BA team, they've tried to drag the hose reel in. It's got wedged tight under the wheel of a car. It was a right clusterfuck, honestly. And I just thought, you know, okay, bless them. They're doing the best and all the rest of it. But Bryn Evans would have leapt on that. We would have been turning out into the yard. He would have got 2 old cars parked up. He would have turned us out into the yard, right, hose reel off, and we would have lined up every, you know.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean, drill, test, adjust. If it didn't go well in a job, the training then was adjusted so that you got it absolutely slick. we used to have lots and lots of terraced house fires. There was a lot of rough terraced areas. Coal fires, still 1974. People burning candles. You still get candles burning now for religious reasons, but at the time, hard up people used to have candles, the electric cut off. We used to have a lot of house fires, and we got it to the point, Whitewatch Central, we got it to the point where we could turn up, deal with it, slick, professional. And it's discouraging a way in 2020, I think it was probably last year, 2020, when you drive past a modern crew, modern appliances, better kit than we had. We didn't have the flash hoods, we didn't have the proper firefighting because we didn't have a lot of the kit that they've got now. And yet, our professionalism of the way was more slick. And that's no disrespect to the crews. As I mentioned earlier, one of my interests is training, physical training, martial arts training, and even fire service training to a point. You've got to get it right. Because there will be instances, there will be times. I mean, these days, obviously, the call loading's not quite as bad. But if you do 30 years, if you do a full career, there will be times where things are absolutely on a knife edge.
Oh, yeah.
You've literally got those two paths. Cock it up, people die. Get it right, people can be safe. And I'm not trying to be over dramatic about it, but there will be instances like that where training really pays off. So all the repetition, it's like fighting. I mean, coming back to martial arts, I won a British title and, my first opponent, I knocked him out in 10 seconds. And people had come down all the way from Leicester to London to watch. And they were sort of like, well, that wasn't very entertaining. Well, I'm sorry, I don't want to be entertaining. I just want to win as quickly as possible. There was a great boxer a few years ago, probably way beyond, I don't know how old you are, Pete, but a boxer called Lloyd Honeyghan. And he won a fight very quickly. And the commentator, a chap called Reg Guthrie, said to him, "Are you disappointed that he didn't last longer rounds?" And he just said, "Are you crazy? You don't get paid for overtime.
Yeah.
You just want to win." And that's how firefighters should be. You don't want any cock-ups. There will be time. I don't want to be over dramatic. It's not every time you turn out, but there will be times when you are absolutely on the fucking edge. Yeah. And those particular times, all that training, all those times when you turned out when it was raining, did your drills and all the rest of it. We used to drill, like I say, we used to start off with Q&As. Where's the nearest tank? I don't think you use tanks now because of safety reasons, but where's the nearest tank? Where's the nearest Doubleton? Topography had to be spot on. The piss taking would take the flesh off your bones. If you got a question wrong, they'd just rip you to shreds, But everybody had the turn. Then you do locker drill. So, there'd be 2 pumps, 2 young lads would say, right, sledgehammer, pump. And you've got to go straight to the locker where the sledgehammer is hiding conveniently at the back, retrieve it and get back there first, so we knew where the kit was on the appliance. Yeah. There were none of these pull-out trays then, so stuff used
not the old locker shuffle.
Stuff used to be like put in the locker and you perhaps have to find it or whatever, rather than pulling it out and having like a shadow board where you can just take it. Then we used to do turnout drills. The typical turnout drill would be, right, okay, turn out into the yard, pitch to 135, third drill balcony, hose reel aloft, you can either carry it aloft or haul it aloft, whatever. Let's see which crew gets water on first. So it would literally be a race. Everybody would be professional enough to want to be first. None of this processional sort of stuff.
I love pedestrian. I love that side of it, and people feel funny about this now. They feel funny about the competition aspect of things. Like competition is bad, and it's not necessarily about winning, because ultimately nobody in these sorts of situations wins or loses. But healthy competition really inspires the best out of them, because there are losers and winners in life. That's just the way it is. None of this taking part ribbons and all that sort of stuff. Life is about winners and losers. Okay, and it's not necessarily that we should vilify that process. You should use it as a tool to encourage you to get the best out of yourselves and those around you, because on a fire station you're on a team. When we think about winners and losers, I'm not talking about winners and losers on a watch as such. You're all there to work as a team, but don't be afraid from being have that posed to you, because it can be a very healthy tool.
I think it is. I mean, when you look at why we've got pretty blue lights on the machines and stuff like that, it's to save seconds.
Yeah.
If you're driving 2 miles, I don't know if you drive or not, but if you're driving 2 miles, obviously you've got the lights, you've got the alerters. We used to have 2-tone horns and bells, but I mean, like now you've got the alerters and strobe lights and all the rest of it. It's to save seconds. Yeah. So why waste seconds when you get there? Yeah. And this is the thing. I mean, like, we're running with Lacons. We used to run with Lacon ladders. We used to run from, wherever we took it off the appliance. We used to run, and you'd be expected to get the jack bar down, cock on, 1/3 of the working night. So you knew which window or which balcony you were pitching to. You knew where it was going to be. I mean, okay, if you did a drill for the HMI or something, they'd go around and discreetly put little chalk marks on the drill yard.
Okay.
But we didn't drill with chalk marks.
No.
We were expected to get it right. Confined pitches, it had to be done. Cock on. They wanted it right first time, every time. And again, as an 18-year-old kid, you're sort of saying at soldiers here, like this, why, why be so precise, so exact? But then, as an example, we had a fire in a terrace street, and the Victorian builders used to build factory units for the workers and then build the streets around them.
Yeah.
And as you know, terrace streets in Leicester sometimes are very narrow. People park on the side. Yeah. Can't get the appliance down.
No.
And I can remember distinctly having this factory unit. We needed a lake on. We needed it right now because otherwise we're going to lose the whole lot.
Yeah.
If we got the lake on pitched as soon as we could get the jet in at the right time, we could save the building. So we ended up parking right down the end of this terrace street, probably like a 150, 200-yard run with a lake on, instantly into the pitch. By the time we got there with the lake on, obviously blokes were in out Dutch rolls. We got 4 Dutch rolls out, so what's that, 25 yards each? Must have been at least 100 yards. I might, middle of the night, strobe lights, it's a bit disorienting. But a considerable distance where we run with a lake on. And then that's how we used to drill. That's how we used to train. Towards the 90s, as I say, health and safety started to take over a little bit, and we lost that. All of a sudden, we couldn't run with ladders anymore. Maybe even earlier than 90s. I can't remember the exact time scale. You can't run with ladders anymore. Someone somewhere has fell over, got a hurty knee. So now everybody across the nation now has got to walk with ladders. You can't do carry down anymore. We used to do carry downs, live carry downs. Okay, the bloke on the top had an arrestor device, in case you
dropped him over.
I never saw anybody chuck anybody off, but all of a sudden, no, you can't do carry downs anymore. Can't do them for training, No, can't do carry downs. So they took out a lot of the edgy sort of stuff. And my attitude, and a lot of the older blokes, I wasn't particularly an older bloke at the time, but I certainly picked up on their attitude was, you've got to train to do the dangerous stuff. Otherwise, you can ask people who are untrained to go out to the job and do it. And that's to real potential for harm, not just for the crew, but, for the people who potentially you're trying to rescue.
Yeah.
So you've got to do the dangerous stuff in a controlled environment. And again, there's so many parallels with martial arts. You can't get people sparring, touch fight, and then put them into full contact. They've got to gradually build up the intensity so that when they get there on the day and the first shuddering, horrible blow goes in, they're not totally frozen like a rabbit in the headlights because they're not used to being hit hard. You've got to build it up.
Mike Tyson always said that, didn't he? He said everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face, and if you're not used to taking blows, then you don't know how you're going to behave in it because you've never really entered in the fight or flight mode. And then when you do that, which you inevitably will, all of those planning and all that tactics and all of that game strategy goes out the window. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things with training. I mean, I'm not trying to be sort of like wise after the event or whatever, but for example, RTCs, where the station near where I live, they do a lot of RTC training, and you get 2 cars shoved together like that. So you get the dummy. I know this isn't visual, but you get the dummy sitting there like that. You get the 2 cars together, and then you get a crew that get off, and they get the sort of like the Hamatro or whatever. I don't know if you still got Hamatro, but they get the cutting gear off, and they do it and all this. When have you ever been to an RTC like that, where you've got to cut somebody out? It doesn't very often happen. I mean, it does happen, but it's the rarity, isn't it? I mean, like, we used to cover with the ET from Central, we used to cover like the A47, we used to cover the M1. You get 2 cars on the A47, both doing 70 mile an hour, 140 mile an hour impact speed. They hit each other. One ends up 100 yards away, upside down in the ditch with petrol pissing out everywhere. Yeah. The other one, he's gone off on the other direction, he's gone into a tree. And now, you turn up and you've got a set of cutting gear. And you've got 2 cars 200 yards apart now with screaming occupants. You know what I mean? You can't train for that, I think. You can work out how to use the cutting tools, but it's difficult to train for that on a sterile drill yard with the 2 cars shoved together. Yeah. It's an unrealistic thing. It's like, you're training people the manual handling of how to use equipment. You turn it this way, it opens, turn it this way. But, your eye protection, you're training all the nice stuff. But to actually train for the incident, to my mind, you've got to actually sort of immerse yourself in it and sort of think, well, realistically, what are we going to be facing here? Let's try and simulate that on the drill yard, not just make it nice and convenient. So there's only a very, very little pile of glass to sweep up.
Yeah.
Let's actually set it up so that it reflects what we're going to do.
We are quite lucky with our cutting equipment these days. I mean, we have quite a wide range, and every appliance carries 2 or 3. They're now hydraulics, which is effectively, we've lost the whole matro pump, so we use a very, very powerful battery-operated one, and it just pierces through them. So we do a hell of a lot of cutting these days, but I totally appreciate where you're coming from. It's very hard to simulate the real environments when you just have a fairly benign incident with vehicles gently pushed up against each other. The reality of an incident, especially these days when vehicles are faster than they ever have been. We go to some very high-speed traumatic stuff. You know, in the area that I live in, there's a lot of country roads with people whipping along in nice sports cars, and they find those trees and those crossroads rather tricky to navigate sometimes. That's
right. Yeah, I mean, my son's just been home with his girlfriend, she's French, and they call the passenger seat in the car the death seat. No, that's what she said. We said to her, do you want to sit in the front? No, I'm fine. They call that the death seat. And I'd never heard of this before, but it's true. I mean, the number of cars we used to go to. Remember, I joined in on 74. I mean, it's before the drink driving rules, before the seatbelt rules, before airbags, before ABS, and before power steering for a lot of cars. All the safety features that we now take for granted, they weren't there then. But cars were getting quicker. So you've got like your Mini Coopers, you've got your Escort Mexicos, you've got these quite fast little cars built like a biscuit tin. The crumple zone started at the front, finished at the bloody seat post.
Went all the way through sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a lane near Leicester, Evington, called Shady Lane, and it's just big, huge trees either side. The number of times we turn out to there, and it's exactly what George's girlfriend said. Pissed up lad, racing with his mate or whatever, they go off the road, twat a tree, and it's the passenger side that gets it. Yeah. We used to get loads of those, like we got out and there's this poor kid, young girl, 16 years old or whatever, her boyfriend's pissed, he's got out, he's all right, looking for sympathy or whatever. Didn't get much. No. But then his poor old girlfriend is in, I could say what Melanie called this, the death seat.
Who was probably very uncomfortable during the entire ride. It wasn't their decision or her decision or his decision, whoever maybe in the passenger seat. And this isn't always necessarily, I mean, I know we use the example there of perhaps a very selfish young individual, which isn't stereotypical of all of them, but even just a common survival instinct is when you're heading towards that danger, you instinctively will turn away from it. And that inherently means whoever's sat in that proverbial death seat is going to take a brunt of the impact. And you're right. I've seen that myself many times.
Yeah, it was different then. We had an ET at Central, which was pretty busy. I mean, most Friday and Saturday nights. I mean, there used to be a gang of us. The procedure used to be, I mean, it might be different now because as you say, you've got cutting equipment on most frontline pumps. Yeah. At the time, we had an RTA pump, which was 301, was its nomination at the time. And the ET used to turn out. So you got 7 blokes. And the ET was like a mobile workshop. It had a walking area at the back. We used to call it the blood wagon because if you went out to something really snotty, all the kit would be chucked in the back of the ET. Yeah. And then you'd literally wash it out.
When you get back, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It used to carry all the spare BA sets as well. So it was a sort of comms vehicle, BA tender and emergency tender at the same time. And I talk to lads now, when's the last time you went to an RTA? Oh, crikey, when do we have one? 8 months ago or something like that. Really? We used to be very, very regular. I mean, I wouldn't say every Friday night, but on many occasions, again, this is before the drink drive rules, we used to turn out, the A47 used to be absolutely bloody lethal going out to Leicester. We used to turn out to loads there. And again, the same sort of thing, we used to train. We used to train religiously. If we went to a vehicle, when I first joined, we had what's called Senga saws and zip guns, which were pneumatic tools.
Yeah, like a recip saw.
Took a lot of
like a reciprocating saw.
Yeah, exactly. The Senga saw was just like a short thing. Yeah. I mean, it'd go through an A-post okay. Once vehicles started getting a little bit too, say, for example, Volvos, they were probably the first that used to have a real solid steel bar through the whole passenger cage. Yeah. It just wouldn't touch it. But then luckily, fairly soon afterwards, we started getting the whole matros, The zip guns, we used to take roofs off, literally by opening them like a tin can. You'd start off with a tool almost vertical to punch a hole through the skin of the roof. Then you'd change the angle to about a 30-degree angle so you could drive through. It's like a pneumatic chisel.
Yeah.
You go through, you cut a a big hole. So rather than cutting through the A, the B, the C post either side, lifting the roof off, you'd make a big sort of U-shaped cut in it, then peel it back, then cut through all the fabric. Well, of course, that had to change as soon as they started installing airbags and things like that, where you're concerned about cutting away, exposing cylinders and all the rest of it. But that's the way we used to do it, you know.
We had a nibbler for some time when I first joined, which was a very, very similar tool, and it allowed you to just peel away, like a tin opener, just peel away skins of the vehicle. But now, with all the reinforced steel and stuff like that, it really adds a whole level of complexity. And I feel like we don't necessarily communicate as much with... well, there's two things there. So we don't communicate as much with the vehicle manufacturers to get a good understanding of what's actually in these things. And also, the ability for us to get hold of vehicles now, it can actually be quite difficult, you know, and you'd love to be able to cut an entire vehicle to pieces, do all your glass drills, do all your door drills, you know, roll it over with the winch or something like that, and really go to town on one, almost every set if you could. And that's where you're getting that consistent exposure. But you can be waiting months now to get a vehicle returned.
We were lucky. I mean, when I was at Easton, we used to have a good relationship with a bloke called Herbie who had a scrapyard. And Herbie would come round and bring a car round, and he'd sort of lay a bit off, put it in the yard, and we'd just descend on it like locusts, just completely obliterate it. Ring him up, and then he'd come back and sort of pick up the chassis, because we'd load all the cut-off pieces on it, pick it up, take that one away, bring us another one. So we're really lucky like that at Easton. Central, not so much. No, we used to have scrap cars, but they'd be there for a while. Going back to airbags, I mean, years ago, I'm going back, like I say, when I joined them, probably years before that, going back to the 50s, when fast jets had ejector seats, we used to have an ejector seat key. I don't know if you still carry them.
No.
But the idea was to disable the charges on the ejector seat.
Oh, wow.
So if you had to rescue a pilot, I mean, obviously, if a fast jet came down at that angle, I mean, it'd be sort of like spread over a mile radius. But well, the ejector seats at the time used to have explosive charges, obviously, to lift them up and out the canopy. And we used to have ejector seat pins that you could actually fit into a Harrier or whatever jet it was.
Wow.
Not that, I mean, we'd be there to sort of back up the RAF crews. So, you know, so I mean, we'd only be there to sort of like provide manpower. But we used to carry these ejector seat keys. And I actually wrote, believe it or not, not in a corny sort of way, but I actually contacted a couple of major car manufacturers and said, well, why the hell don't we have some facility on a car where we can literally put a key in?
Yeah, just a special firefighter slot or something like that, where we can have a special key, disengages all of the... deactivate. So either empties, any that haven't already been activated, or just completely switching off the power. Yeah, for all of the supplementary restraint system, because there's loads of things, you know, that can be a hazard to firefighters when we're trying to do that extrication.
Well, that's right. I mean, when I was in, there was a bloke, an American chap, who I watched the video of it. It's quite horrific, really. But he was leaning over the casualty, trying to do something. The airbag deployed, hit the side of his helmet, which then buried itself deep into the face of the casualty.
Yeah.
I think the firefighter and the casualty were both...
He just gets knocked out, doesn't he? I've seen it. He goes limp and he just hits the deck. Yeah, absolutely. And that's just one that was caught on video. You know, for every rare occasion it's actually caught, you know, thousands more have probably had it happen to them. Covered lots of bits there. We haven't directly mentioned 1,000 degrees at the ceiling. Are you happy for me to ask a few questions about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the first thing I'll say is I've taken it off sale.
Okay.
At the moment. I've got it, but what I ask people to do, I mean, people have asked for it. What I ask people to do is to make a donation to the firefighters' charity. And you can do that by text message.
Mm-hmm.
So you go on the firefighters' charity site, there's a number you can text, they get £5, and it just comes off your monthly bill.
Yeah.
And then if they do that, send me the acknowledgement from the firefighters' charity, which comes up obviously immediately on your phone, screenshot it, send it to me with an email address, and then I'll send them the PDF.
Love it.
Because I was selling it through Amazon. It sold pretty well. It had some good reviews. The only bad review it got was from a woman who, unfortunately, I criticised an officer because he was bloody effeminate and ineffective, to be honest. He wasn't, in my opinion, he wasn't a good officer at all.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a nice enough man, but he wasn't... I mean, Jack Tansley, if he turned up to an incident, everybody breathed a sigh of relief because you knew that things were going to start.
Yeah.
The balance shifted. Just that one man turning up, all of a sudden, things were going to start.
Yeah.
coming good.
There was an air of control and an air of, people feel at ease with that level of, practicality or responsibility that some people bring to it. It's also that command presence. Some people just don't have it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this chap I talked about, this was the only bad review the book got. It was a chap. I'll just tell you one funny little story. I know it's going off at a tangent.
Please do. The tangents are the best ones.
We had a chemical incident, and we turned up, and there was a brown bottle leaking fluid. We looked on the side. So obviously we rigged up in chemical suits, all the rest of it. Full Monty, full procedure. Chemical incident unit standing by, showers all set up for decontam. We really, really did the full thing. And we didn't mind doing that because we thought even if it's not a problem, it's not an issue. It's just another training session, really, for when there is
standard operating procedure. We know we need to do it, so let's just crack on.
Yeah. Anyway, this particular officer turned up, shirt sleeve, black cap, because obviously then the officers still used to wear a uniform with all the braiding and the fancy stuff. He went over to this brown bottle, picked it up, and went because we thought it might be phenol, and phenol, as I'm sure you're aware, is a very, very unpleasant substance.
Absolutely.
Picked it up, took a big sniff in and went, no, that's not phenol. Knock off, make up. And we just stood there and thought, what the hell are we dressed up like this for on a Sunday morning? Because Superman here, this super officer, all he needed was a cape. He can come over and just sniff stuff and just decide straight away. His nose is so finely sensitive to the.
But also, what a gamble! What a gamble! He could have just hit the deck then.
It could have just gone. Boom. Yeah. Anyway, I mentioned this chap, as being quite an ineffective sort of leader, and that was the only bad review the book got. So I'm sorry that went on for a while. Why did I write the book? I mean, a few years ago, I'd been to the Firefighters' Tea, which Pete and Steve Gisby organised.
Yeah.
And Steve Gisby was trying to get people to tell stories.
That's exactly
send in stories.
Mate, yeah. Sorry, go on. I love that.
Yeah, it was trying to get people to send stories of incidents to him, so he could collate it all. And I think he got one response. I don't think people were interested because part of the job is you don't like to big yourself up. You don't like to put yourself forward. Oh, look at me, I did this brave thing. I can understand the reluctance to do that because you're part of a crew and nobody wants to sort of say, it was me.
Mate, I get that entirely. And that's the whole thing with the podcast. I always say to people, it's tough, and it's sometimes unpopular or people just feel awkward or whatever to stand there and, bang your chest and beat your drum and I am the voice of the emergency services. Oh, you're the voice of the emergency services, are you, Pete? No, I'm not. This is why it's the Firefighters podcast. It's not the Pete Wakefield podcast because what we do love is the stories. And it's not you, it's not Gary, it's not any of the other guests talking about themselves. It's somebody sincerely asking. And this is what the public want to hear. This is what other firefighters want to hear. If you ask somebody to send in the stories, they might be reluctant. But if you were sat, and you'd do it 1,000 times, guys, sat in a room full of old firefighters, it'd be stories galore. Yeah. Stories galore. You just need to put a dictaphone in the middle of the room. You'd have 1,000. Yeah.
Well, the reason I wrote the book, there was a couple of reasons, really. Steve had tried to get people to come together and put stories in. A few years before, I retired at 50. I could have gone on to 55, but I retired at 50 because my youngest son had been really ill. We nearly lost him, which was quite traumatic for me, for my wife. It's a very horrible time, really.
Sorry to hear that.
My wife afterwards was quite unwell. She was quite sort of down about it, because obviously as a mother, you try everything you can to save your child. And eventually he was taken into hospital and it was a bit touch and go. And, he pulled through and he's now young and strong and playing rugby and, everybody's happy.
But it could have gone a different way.
It could easily have gone a different way. So this is one reason I retired a few years earlier than I needed to.
Yeah.
But one thing that was great is I retired at 50 because, the youngster was quite bad. People heard that he was bad, even though I retired. And the benevolent fund, as it was at the time, obviously Firefighters Charity now, at the time it was the National Benevolent Fund. The rep was brilliant. He came round and he said, look, why don't you just go away? We've got this place down in Devon, Harkham House.
Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? Did you go?
Yeah, lovely place. It says you don't need to go there for therapy. They're not going to make you bloody swim with weights on or anything like that. Just go down there for a recuperative break. It's a lovely Devon Valley.
Yeah.
Just go down there. And it was just what my wife needed, to be honest. We all needed. So we went down. And obviously, because we were benefactors of beneficiaries of the charity, I think we paid about 30 quid or something, for a week of us, the whole family for a week. So I've always been one. I'm not trying to be Mother Teresa, but I've always been one. I don't like taking charity. I'd rather, if I can, I could give something back. So I thought, well, Steve's not had much joy getting this book sorted out. I can't talk about everybody else's story because trying to draw stuff out of people is going to be difficult anyway. What I can do is talk about my story, my time in the fire service. So I styled it as 1,000 degrees at the ceiling because I can remember distinctly going into a house fire. Bearing in mind we didn't have flash hoods at the time. We just had V8 steps and then just the helmet stood on top. So all your skin at the back was completely exposed.
Yeah.
And I can remember
You've
going into
done well to keep your hair, brother, because I know a couple of firefighters from that age, I've seen a lot of scald marks on the top of people's crowns where they've obviously been sweating and it's just been boiling off the top of their head inside their helmet.
Yeah. I think most of us got scars, at the time. I mean, I've certainly got scars. But I got into this house fire, and afterwards the investigation pointed out that they estimated the temperature at the ceiling was 1,000 degrees. I can't remember if he said F or C, but either way, it was...
No, totally believable. I've been in some of the hot boxes that didn't have the fire loading that would have been present back then. I mean, fire loading and anti-flame and fire retardant materials that we have now, we don't really face the materials that you faced back then, not at all.
But I can remember this. So this figure, 1,000 degrees, stuck in my mind. I thought, well, So the title of the book was 1,000 Degrees at the Ceiling, Life on the Thin Red Line. Now, I should have put my life on the thin red line because people thought life on the would be sort of all inclusive to include all firefighters. So really, it was me.
I think it's a great title. I'm honestly a little bit jealous of it, to be honest with you. But I think it's a fantastic title.
So the first part of the book was about the training and the recruitment procedure, which is pretty much what we talked about already. The way the training was. The second part was just incidents, and it was just essays really about, in no particular order. If an incident came to mind, I'd just write down what I remembered about that incident. A few rescues I've done, some things I've been involved with that could have gone badly wrong, And I wrote them down essay style, and then afterwards I sort of copied and pasted and put it around. Doing it.
It's a labour of love, mate, honestly, putting a book together. Yeah. I made an attempt at it a few years ago and I've still got all the stuff sitting somewhere, but it really, people underestimate how much it takes to do that. So I take my hat off to you going through the process. Well,
I did it, and I put it on for sale on Amazon, and I didn't really expect it to take off. My goal was to raise 500 quid, because I thought, I've been down there for a week. I don't know how much they normally let the bungalows out for if you just want to go for a break. But I thought, if I raise 500 quid, that's fine. I was a little bit surprised and disappointed at the charity because I said to the charity, right, is there a tax efficient way I can send you the money?
Yeah.
And they were sort of like, what money? I said, well, I wrote this book. It's for sale now. Royalties are coming in. So it varies. 1 month, I think 1 month I got about 300. Sorry, that was with both books, the martial arts book and but about £300. So probably £150. So is there a tax-efficient way I could do this? Because if I actually gift aid it to you, you'll get the extra 25%. And they were a bit sort of like, well, no, we're not really comfortable with that because I put in the introduction of the book, part of the proceeds of this sale, I couldn't say all of it, but part of the proceeds will be donated to the Firefighters Charity. And the goal was to raise 500 quid. They were a little bit sniffy about that, to be honest, which surprised me because they were sort of like, oh, no, you can't say you're doing it on behalf of the charity because people might buy your book instead of somebody else's. And so, anyway, long story short, I decided probably the easiest thing to do was just to take into account the fluctuation and just make a standing order from myself, a personal standing order to the charity.
Yeah.
So obviously some months I got a little bit more, some months got a little bit less.
Yeah, sales.
And it was for sale for about, I think it was for sale for about 18 months. I had a couple of complaints because I tried very hard not to give too much away with the incidents.
Yeah.
I didn't really elaborate them, and sometimes I had to change the venue. So, for example, if I said we turned out to Wigston or something like that, it might have been another venue, but I'm just trying to disguise it a little bit. But there was two particular incidents I described that were quite rarities, and I was contacted by family members who sort of said, "Well, what are you doing? What are you doing?" So, I'm writing about the fire service. I'm trying to raise money for charity. We didn't give you permission to write about my dad or whatever. So I terribly sorry if I'm offended. I mean, that was never the intention. I did disguise some details. I mean, you've obviously put two and two together and made.
When you know what the real story is, you can get very, very defensive, and you can connect the dots because you know what the real story is. But I could quite easily, and I have done at times, recall an incident, and I'll replace the place, and I'll replace the location, and I might even replace the sex of the casualties. But I will describe the rest of it in such innate detail because it's true that people will go, well, that was my dad. And you go, well, hang on a minute. The casualty was a woman, and it was in a different area. And they're like, no, but I know that's them. And I'm like, yeah, but nobody else does. So actually, it's irrelevant. Yeah, that's right. So anyway, long story short, I mean, I raised enough money for the charity. So I thought the easiest thing now, I fell out with Amazon a bit as well, because Amazon, they're not friends to authors. They try to make out, we're here to help authors. They're really not. They're there to make money, and that's it. They were taking money off me for US tax, which is ironic because they don't bloody pay tax over here. They kept sending me these bloody tax forms to fill out. I'd spend an hour filling it out, all the details, blah, blah, blah. Send it off. A month later, we've not received your form. So they were taking money off me for US tax. That was being taken off at source. Then, at the time, I'd left the job, so obviously I was filling out a self-employed tax return, doing odd jobs, bit of driving. I was filling out a self-assessment tax return, putting royalties down, so I was losing another 20% for that. Yeah. So all of a sudden, for selling it, I think I sold it for $3.99 or something. I was getting about 50p per book. But this is rubbish. So I thought the easiest thing to do is take it off Amazon. So stick two fingers up to Jeff Bezos, whatever his name is. He's got enough, don't worry.
And then anybody who wants to, if they email me, my email address is quite open to the public. So anybody who wants to can email me without acknowledgement.
We'll put it all in the detail for the podcast anyway. That what it's called, how people can contact you, making the donation to the charity. All of that's going to go in the links.
Well, the way I do it now, obviously, is everything goes to the charity. So the US tax gets nothing, the UK tax gets nothing. I'm not bothered for me. I mean, I wrote it as sort of like memoir, really. I actually wrote it, for the reasons described. I also thought it'd be good for my sons. My sons were reaching the point where they were sort of like trying to look at careers, what they wanted to do. They've not really expressed an interest in the fire service, which is completely fine, but I tried to sort of put over that it's a great life. It's a life well spent helping other people.
Oh, God, it is.
Yeah, I count myself very fortunate to do a job that I really enjoyed. People didn't get on with everybody. Nobody gets on with everybody. I'm quite a stubborn bastard, so I did fall out with some people. But doing a job helping people, I mean, think about the fire brigade, you get paid 3 times. You get your wages, which you'd expect from any job. You get the camaraderie, you get the fun, the laughter and all the rest of it, good times on station, and you get the gratitude of the public. Yeah. I'm not being all milky-eyed here. I'm not sobbing myself into sleep or anything about it, but it's just a good feeling, I mean, for years, I can remember doing one rescue. We got a woman out of a house. She came to the station afterwards to say thank you. She took my name. I think my name was in the Leicester Mercury or something like that, but she took my name. And she used to send a Christmas card every year, fire station. Eventually, she went on to have a daughter of her own who has now got another daughter. So, it wasn't just that one particular girl that we helped. It wasn't me personally, it was the crew.
Yeah, but
I think I was wearing BA, but I mean, as we say, it just potluck who was wearing BA at the time or climbing the ladder. I mean, it's just, whoever does it.
Anybody would have done it, but the fact of the matter is you were the one that was there at the time.
Oh, yeah. But we quite easily could have been somebody else. I mean, I'm not sort of like...
No,
I mean, just part of the crew. But these things are very special. I mean, I used to belong to a charity group. This charity raised millions for good causes, and there's some very, very wealthy people. I can remember sitting, at a dinner, I can remember sitting next to a man who was a peer of the realm, and he sort of worked, he spent his whole time looking after the family pile. He'd run the family businesses, the farms, and had staff and all the rest of it. But he was coming to the end of his life. He just had a cancer diagnosis, and he sat there. It was very, very sad, really. Millionaire, this bloke. Like I say, titled, sat in the Lords. And he said, well, I'm going to go soon. It's not much they can do. It's terminal. I'm just getting pain relief. And you go towards the grave, and you wonder if you really made a difference. I've looked after this big old house, big drafty old house. Looked after the tenants as best I can, the farmers and all the rest of it. It's just, you wonder really at this time of life, have you made a difference? Now, this is the great thing about the fire service. I'm sure you've got it. You know that you have made a difference.
Mate, yeah.
As corny as it sounds, I'm not going to go to my grave thinking, I wonder if I help people because we got paid for doing it. And that's a marvellous bloody thing, really. I can't understand. I mean, I never understood talking about good officers. I never understood kids who come in at sort of like an early age, full of bloody piss and vinegar, before they've done anything really. You know, like they've done fuck all really. They've done hardly anything job-wise, incident-wise. They've got no real experience. Boom, they're off on the career trajectory, which takes them up as high as they can go. They're on 100 grand a year, in charge of men and machines and all that. Basically, their skills, their basic skill set, practical, rolling around in the mud, you know, holding the back of heads on after motorcycle. It's not there. They've not done it. And I could never really understand. I mean, after the first few officers I had, which were real, they were men amongst men, if that's an old-fashioned expression, but if that makes sense. I'd see young officers. I mean, like just before I retired, I had some right bloody arguments with some of them, you know, so full of themselves. I felt like I said, what have you done? Tell me what you've done. Tell me. Exactly.
You know what, mate? I just want to catch you there because I agree with you, and I'm literally my passion is bursting now because I don't want to go into too much of it. But we have these promotion processes and all this sorts of stuff now, right? And everyone's forever arguing about the metrics that we use and all this sort of stuff. And I'm one that's like, can't you just sit down and tell me what have you Gary, what have you done to add value in your role that's aligned with the purpose of the fire service? What have you done? Don't tell me about an exam. Yeah, exams are nice. Okay, we all like exams. Yeah, and they show you've got at least the ability to absorb knowledge. But that doesn't show me what you've done. What have you done, and how has that added value to your crew, to your team, or to the community? And people, that is a really awkward, simple question because people want to list off, oh, I've got a certain character trait, or oh, I've passed a certain exam. Okay, great. So what have you done with that? What have you actually done that you can honestly, and other people would agree and assign your name to that and say, Gary helped out with this, and it went from here to here. It impacted that family, or it impacted this team, and that is something that people feel awkward about it because I think so many people know they're not doing anything. No,
that's right. I always had this theory. As an example of that, we had a particular principal officer. He'd moved, I think we were about his 5th or 6th brigade. So there's a man who's got a family who's prepared to take his wife out or whatever she's doing. Sorry, love, we're moving. I want an extra bloody pip. Took his kids out of school. So they were bullied at school because every couple of years when he got a promotion, they were going to a new school and being picked on because they didn't speak like the local. And eventually, fantastic, they arrive at principal officer status, brilliant. But I could never have lived my life like that. You know, I was quite happy to be a crew manager. You know, if the opportunity presented itself, I mean, I did deputise for the watch manager on occasions. I could have seen myself being a watch manager, but above that, if I'd had to start hopping around from brigade to brigade, get promotion, no, I don't see myself in that mould at all. I've never understood, as I said earlier, I've never understood why people are doing a job like we do, you know, which is going out. And it's a bit of a cliched term, but the role of the emergency services to impose order on chaos. You go out to a shit situation and you try and get the best possible result.
Yeah.
And that's where your satisfaction is. Not looking at bloody computer screens. And just before I retired, we had one bloke, I think he's still in the job, right? Well, you can edit this out, but what a twat he was. It came on the station. Right, I've done all the computer predictions. You don't need an ET. What? You don't need an ET. So I said, look, excuse me, have you thought this through? We've vast road, lots of RTCs, we've got a major rail network, airport, got all these risks, we've got major chemical factories, got all these risks. We need an ET. No, I've done it all on the computer. I thought, as soon as he said, I've done it all on the computer, I just thought, you're not living in my world, mate. You're not rolling around in the mud like we have to, trying to get people out of cars at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're sitting in front of a computer screen in an air-conditioned office between 9 and 5. You know, I mean, okay, he might go out occasionally in the supervisory role. By the time he gets there, the job's half done. But I just thought then that's the death of officerdom, as I remember it.
Do you know what I hear when I hear that? Because I've been aware of several individuals like the individual that you're describing there, and what I feel when I walk away from conversations like that, the biggest thing I hear there is the poor soft skills and the poor communication. And I'm not trying to get too arty-farty with it or anything like that, but on the fireground, so let's take you back to when you were pulling up outside and we wanted to get the hose reel down the middle of these cars, and it needed to be slick and it needed to be efficient. Yeah. We wanted efficiency, wanted to maximise the crew that we've got with us.
Yeah.
Now, at the very core of it, that's what some, not all, some principal officers are just trying to make a name for themselves, but some of them are also looking for efficiencies. Now, the problem is sometimes from seeing the other side of the coin, they spend a lot of time in front of a computer doing the legwork, for want of a better description, and they come out with an efficiency that they think the computer has told them through the number of incidents, the where the money's spent, and all this sort of stuff. Now, what I feel should happen, and I worked in a statistical analyst role where I did lots of marginal gains in a fast-moving consumer goods, big billion-pound company before I was in the fire service. Now, we would do all of this. We'd go on a big food production line and we'd see the efficiency on a computer and we'd go, this is what we need to achieve, right? And then what I would do, and what other members of the team would do, and what you see great leaders do, is I'd go out with no bloody clipboard, with no preconceived ideas or anything like that, and I would try and understand what the pulse of the team is. What do they feel? Where do they see efficiencies? Where do they, if this was their fast-moving consumer goods line, or if this was their fire service, where do they think the money is best spent, and how would they justify it in their mind, and not try and trigger the defensiveness? Because we need to be a team, it needs to be a collaborative decision. It needs to be something that we arrive at together. I need to marry up the statistics with Gary, the boots on the ground, the crew commander, the team that's actually doing the job. We need to marry these up and then also accept that neither of us are going to it's not going to fit our box entirely in the same way that we want it to. But it becomes a lot more of a collective decision. But like you say, if somebody walks out and says, we're going to get rid of the ET, it's not warranted, immediately you backs up. Immediately you backs up, you're defensive, and you've lost. Doesn't matter how right you are, if the numbers say it or anything like that. And also there's this right and wrong. It's not about you being right or them being wrong. It's about how do we get the best out of what we've got? Because that's what you do on the drill ground every day. That's what you do on the incident ground every day. You've got limited personnel. How do I get the most out of them? We're looking for efficiencies. But I think it all comes down to communication. And you said it so well when you spoke about people that either don't like the job or hate the job now versus what it was like back then. It wasn't because they didn't like the job. You had such a strong culture that I hear you speak about on those stations, and it's the people. It comes down to the people. It's not the uniform, it's not the kit, it's not the pay, it's not the policies, it's not even the community that you serve. It's the people that you're around and their ability to build those relationships. Is there anything that you feel is remotely relevant about that?
I understand exactly what you're saying. I mean, I noticed a sea change in the time I was in the job. Again, I mentioned about Jack Tansley. He'd turn up to an incident and all of a sudden things would start changing for the better. They were hands-on. He'd go to the hottest part of the fire. He'd find the branchman that was nearest to the hottest part of the fire. He'd come and stand right next to you.
Go and place his hand on his shoulder. Hello, mate. What can you see? What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just tell you about an incident I had just before I finished. The watch manager was off, so I was in charge of the watch on that particular night. And we turned out 2 pumps and an ET. In fact, I think to start with, it was 1 pump and the ET because the other pump was off station. 7 blokes. Now, we've got a minibus that had gone off the motorway, rolled several times going down the embankment with a load of immigrant workers in. None of them spoke English at all. I don't think any of them had probably been restrained in the vehicle. So there were no sort of like collision injuries, but there was a lot of peripheral injuries where they'd rolled in this vehicle.
Yeah.
And this vehicle was about 60 foot down a 45-degree slope. It's like a railway track. It's like either a cutting or an embankment. And it'd gone down the embankment. It'd gone through this small wooden fence, rolled a few times, ended up on its side. So we talked about RTCs earlier. How do you chock and block that? You've got a minibus that's on a wet, greasy, muddy slope, 45-degree slope. Any sort of great movements might make it sort of go down. So we ended up lashing it with lines to trees because the windows had gone out. We ended up wrapping GP
I'd probably
lines.
go off the axles and the A and B posts or something like that and try and just, like say, stabilise, just capture the load to start with.
Yeah, we stabilised it by lashing it to trees, basically. So, we got everything stabilised. The ambulances turned up. Obviously, we'd been mobilised to it, I think, by the police or whatever, but the ambulances turned up. We've got to ferry these casualties. Got some walking wounded. We got some that needed sort of assistance. They've got to be sort of half carried up. And we got some that got quite severe injuries, so they needed stretchering up. So I'm dealing with this with 7 blokes. And we've got about 60 feet, 45-degree wet.
That's hard
so we
graft.
put lines, obviously, to pull ourselves up.
Hard graft.
It's hard graft. I mean, we're taking 2 or 3 of us each time. We're taking these casualties up sort of one at a time. 2 or 3 of us, trying to get the others sorted out. So this is just one instance. In the meantime, several officers had turned up. They'd been mobilised. They'd turned up in their vehicles. right? They've got all these lovely cars, all the BMWs, all the, whatever they are with the lovely pretty blue lights on. And they were sitting on this wooden fence. There's about 5 or 6 of them by now, sitting on this wooden fence, watching what we're doing. Not one of them came down. Not one of them came and asked for a briefing, took over. They all stood there talking about the bloody football or whatever they were talking about on this wooden fence. So we're grafting. It must have been an hour. We're grafting, trying to get these people. I remember there were 12. 2 of them quite badly injured. Got them up. So I called people in for an informal sort of debrief. Right, well done, lads. Like that was a shit job. Everybody's shit up. Everybody's exhausted, soaked, fed up. The officers sort of like stood sort of like on the periphery as I was giving like an informal debrief. Let's get back to station, get the kit sorted out. Get a brew. We'll talk about it a bit more when we get there. So anyway, the crews mount up and all the rest of it. The officers get in the cars, except for one. And he came over to me and he said, Gary, quick word, yeah? He said, you're wearing the wrong tabard.
Oh.
I went, what? He says, you're wearing the wrong tabard. What are you talking about? What about? Like, what? I sort of looked down, what? And he said, you're wearing the RTC tabard, which is correct, except that you're no longer on the motorway, so you should have swapped it for the incident commander tabard. So you can imagine my reaction. I sat there watching us, struggling. Not one of you came down and lifted a finger. Nobody said, what do you need? I'll get comms, whatever. We didn't need any more pumps particularly. Once we established that only 2 were quite sort of badly hurt, But I thought that's just the way the job's going. When I compare it to the old officers who would have got stuck in.
Yeah.
And okay, there's this theory now, command theory, that you step back.
Yeah.
I read about
not
command
all
theory
of you, though. One of them step back.
This command theory where you stand inside a dustbin lid and you don't let yourself get distracted because you've got to get the overview. You've got to sort of like,
Yes, the incident commander, which was you at the time.
Absolutely.
Not other. I mean, maybe one of them could be doing some operational performance monitoring and, mentoring and or giving you feedback, but not 6 people.
Yeah, not 60 foot away sitting on a fence.
No, they're not going to give much great feedback from that, other when they see you afterwards and go, hey, mate, looks like you're wearing the wrong tabard. I'm surprised you saw it from your ivory tower, my good man.
Yeah, well, words to that effect. There's a bit more Anglo-Saxon in there when I said it, but yeah. But I just noticed that was the way that the job was going. You've got a lot of officers who sort of like they drove a desk. I mean, even drill. Jack Tansley, I keep coming back to Jack Tansley. I'm not like a fanboy, but credit where it's due. I mean, he was a good officer. You
know what, mate? Just a pause you there because that comes back to recognition. I just want to acknowledge that because that is recognition, and we need to get a lot better at that as well. After that incident there, I'm sure you would have been responsive to the command tabard remark had it had been preceded by. Bloody hell, mate, that was an absolute graft. Really sorry that we didn't seem to come and get involved. We've actually got a massive incident happening in the city. We were trying to organise that. Really, really apologise. It looks like the lads did a great job. Look, make sure everybody's okay. And then follow that final button hook at the end. But acknowledgement, recognition, it's not, come on, guys, it's not rocket science, guys.
No, that's right. Again, coming back to training and sort of like the ethos of the job. I can remember Jack Tansley driving into the yard. He used to have a Rover, red Rover 2000, something 999, so it was quite a distinctive vehicle. Drove in. Of course, when he drove in the yard, the sub-officer or the station officer was sort of like, would leap into attention. And he came into the yard and we were just about to do drill. And we were expecting him to come over and say, right, bad news, lads, such and such has happened or whatever. There must have been some reason for interrupting the drill session. They went to the boot of his vehicle, got his kit out, donned his kit, came over in his full DO regalia, and the station officer said to him, morning sir, everything all right? Yeah, would you like to take the drill? So he said, no, I'm sure you've got something planned. He went and got in the line.
Yes, brother.
He got in the line and he was doing lake-on drills, all the rest of it. He was doing the training.
Yeah.
And afterwards, went upstairs, had a cup of tea and all the rest of it. When I tell people this, they don't believe it, but I swear to God, it's true. We went upstairs, like caps off, no real formality. Would you want a cup of tea? Do you want a bacon cob? The usual stuff. And then somebody sort of said to him, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, I might turn out to an incident where somebody gets hurt and we need to pitch a lake on.
Yeah.
I've got to make sure my skills are up to date.
I always do this. Whenever we get a new recruit, we just had a new recruit on our station, and we were doing, they have to learn the basics of pumping and all that sort of stuff. And the LPP, or PPU as we call it now, the lightweight portable pump, pumping from open water, is always one of those little bit of a black magic skills for people that haven't done it before. You've got to feather it, you've got to play about with it. And when it's dry, it's always the hardest because the seals aren't wet and all this sort of stuff. Whenever we step up on that on the first one, I'm always like, I'm going to go first. Yeah, and I'm gonna do it first, because otherwise people are always like, oh, it's always the hardest when it's first. Why do I have to go first? That's not. I says, I would never ask somebody to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And if it doesn't bloody work, then let's have it not work on me, and then I can demonstrate. People can give me feedback, and I can demonstrate how you want to take feedback. So I can be like, you're absolutely right. I wasn't feathering the clutch. I didn't see the the compound gauge jump or anything like that. You've got to be willing to put yourself in that position. I love to hear leaders like that doing it.
Yeah. Well, like I say, Jack came down. When I had my exit interview with the chief, I think I surprised him really, because he sent me this sort of letter, like, sorry you go in, all this, like, quite complimentary, which is nice. He said, I always offer people an exit interview. Would you like to take advantage of that? So, yes, please.
Definitely.
So I went up, I arrived at the appointed time, like best bib and tucker. Secretary brought me in, like the office smelt lovely, it's nice wood panelling and leather, and
very impressive.
Very nice. Not very like a fire station. Anyway, hello, Mr. Chamberlain. I said, Fireman Chamberlain, or just Gary will do. Would you like a cup of tea? Oh, yes, please. I thought she was going to say, would you like Darjeeling or Earl Grey or something? Yeah, just I'll have a cup of tea. No. Would you like some biscuits? Yeah, anything you got, that's fine. Anyway, the chief came in. He said, Fireman Chamberlain, or Gary, or whatever. So lovely to see you. Very, very polite. Neatly pressed shirt and all this sort of stuff. Never been near any grime for years. He said, is there anything you'd like to say? I said, well, yeah. I think you're making the biggest mistake you've ever made, possibly in your fire service career. And I think it's going to cost lives.
Wow. Let me drop that bomb.
He was like shocked. What do you mean? Well, you're about to take the ET, we're still steaming about it. Tell you what, why don't we have 2 ETs? Spend the money. Oh, budgetary straight. So I went to town then. I said, budgetary straight. I stood up, I went over to the window. I said, look, there's your car, Range Rover. There's the car next to it. It's a big flash bloody Jag or something like that. There's the car next to it. I said, are these all brigade vehicles? What are you saying? Officers shouldn't have a nice car? I said, I'm not saying that at all, but the ethos has changed. When I first joined, the ethos was that stations were at the top. They were the sharp end of the wedge. Everything below that was to support the stations. Officers would come on station and say, right, lads, you had a horrible RTC last week. Did you have everything you needed? Well, actually, we could have done with more cutters. Yeah. I'll see what I can do.
Servant leadership. You're there to remove the barriers for those people. They're not there to serve you. You're there to serve them. That's the way it goes. People get this in reverse all the time.
Yeah. By the time I left, we got officers driving around in lovely, lovely, lovely flash cars, but they were saying at the same time, we can't afford to run an ET. And to me, that was completely arse backwards. So why don't the officers come on in the morning and have some pool vehicles? There's 10 officers in headquarters at the moment. One, possibly two might be called out to an incident. The rest of you are going to, why don't we have pool vehicles available so that when they turn up in their own car, they're coming in their own bloody Mini or whatever they decide they want to buy for themselves, the same as I have to buy a car for myself. And then have some vehicles available at headquarters, fast response vehicles, so they can turn out if they're required for command at an incident. Anyway, the chief was horrified by this, like, who are you? Who are you? So, I'm just telling you what I see. I'm reasonably intelligent.
I'm just looking for an efficiency. Like you encourage me to. That's the whole point, right?
Yeah, I didn't actually say to him, I didn't threaten him, but I said, I wonder what they would think if they knew that you were driving around in 100 grand's worth of vehicle and you're saying we can't afford 100 grand's worth of life-saving vehicle. I mean, what do you think the general public would make of that? So it's fair to say that my exit interview wasn't quite as cordial as he expected, After a while, he literally got blood coming out of his ears, because I was giving him so much of a barrage.
Yeah.
Right, I just thought, these blokes, it's a lovely job, great. If people want to make a career out of it, as in promotion, fantastic, power to them. But we should never lose sight of the fact that we're there to serve the public.
100%.
We're not there to feather our own nests. We're not there to build our own little empires. We're not there to, to look good or... the chief officer, for sure, he's got to be a politician. Yeah, he's got to deal with councillors and MPs. And I couldn't do it. I'm too plain spoken. I'd upset too many people. I realised
it hasn't been obvious.
I realised there was a need for diplomats and all the rest of it, but you could employ diplomats. You don't have to employ firefighters to be diplomats. You could employ representatives. They started to go that way, but in my opinion, in the wrong parts of the job. I can remember going to a meeting once with a chief. I forget which one it was, but we had a few chief officers while I was in. Everything he said, he turned around to this little woman. Nobody knew who she was. I reckon she was a spy.
Okay.
And it was sort of like, can I say that? And she'd say, yes, you can say that. And he'd come out with his spiel and then say, can I say that? And afterwards, I said to somebody, who was that? Who was that? You know, like,
that was the puppeteer.
Who was that woman?
That was the puppeteer.
Who was that woman who could telling him what he could say? And she was the new HR woman, not H&R. And she was telling the chief what he could say. It was everything he wanted to come out with. He was having to check with the HR woman. And I just thought, it shouldn't be a little woman who's never been near danger deciding the policies of the fire service. I've never ever been able to understand that. Honestly, I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but like I said earlier, there will be instances in your service where you need every ounce of physical strength you've got. I'll give you one great example I remember. Me and another bloke, I asked him if I could put his name in the book, and he refused. He didn't want to be named. So, okay, I'm going to respect that confidence. I won't tell you who it was. But I can remember going into a BA job in a terrace house. Streets are on hills. So because to get the house level, some houses got like a basement to provide that level platform. We went into this terrace house. Very, very hot. Extremely hot. Worked our way in. Went all the way around the ground floor, couldn't find the fire. Just surprised, because obviously you go from one room to the next, you can feel the increase in temperature. All of a sudden the floor gave way because there's a sub-basement, which is the joists are burnt through, the floor goes away, muggins here, straight through, and I'm standing up to my waist in packing cases, which are well alight.
Whoa.
So I'm basically in a funeral pyre, if you like. I'm not to sound too dramatic, but it's like literally. We used to wear yellow slickers, the old over trousers. They're melting. I'm looking down. I can see them melting, sticking to my legs. So my BA partner grabs hold of the door jamb with one hand. He's got one arm around the door jamb, leans forward, reaches down to me. I grab his hand with both of my hands, and he literally did like a single arm bloody lift. I'm 13, at the time I was about 14 stone, BA set, fire kit and all the rest of it. Now the old BA cylinders were metal, they weren't like these composite, they were heavy cylinders. So he's with one arm, you're a strong lad, I've seen you training on, your videos and all the rest of it. Try doing a single arm row. We're like about 18 stone. That's some physical strength. That
when adrenaline gets kicking in, you surprise yourself, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. I sort of like scrambled up, obviously kicked my feet against the wall to get up. Got up. Now my slickers and my trousers were both completely gone. Virtually burnt through. I got some very minor burns on, I think, the right calf, but I was lucky. A few more seconds in there. Now, I put it to you, and again, this is no disrespect to anybody. I don't question people's courage, commitment, their ability and all the rest of it, but 99% of the job.
Yeah.
How much do you weigh?
I weigh 19 stone.
You weigh 19 stones. By the time you got your kit,
20,
yeah. 20. Let's assume it's dry, it's not wet. It's still about 20 odd stone, aren't you?
Yeah.
With all your kit.
With all that on, yeah.
So would you want an 8 stone person? Now, I'm not going to go down the gender route. I'm not going to go down the race route.
I don't care. Like the gender, anything like that.
Yeah.
Are you physically strong enough to do the job? And not the job at the level we've set it at. But, we said earlier about this culture. Hard times breed hard people. And back then, there was a harder caliber of person. Not man, woman, anything. Just people. Yeah, they were a harder caliber of people with a more physical resilience. And no, you're right, mate. I think it's very unlikely that the vast majority, and we almost make a joke out of it on watch. When we've got to do a casualty movement of any form, put somebody on the stretcher. If we want to be mean about it, we'll put me on there because very few people can move me. Now I'm 19 stone, but I'm a fit 19 stone. I can lift and move and drag. And there's heavier people than me out there. We all know it.
Yeah. I really had these doubts, and I voiced these doubts to a HR woman. And we've got a girl join the brigade, and she was a lovely girl. There's nothing wrong with her character-wise. She was keen. She knew her stuff. The rest of it, she could not pick up her quarter of a lake on ladder to walk. She couldn't pick it up.
And there are also men, obviously, that struggle lifting those sorts of things as well. But what can you do about it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You're just not strong enough.
Well, I said to this HR woman, I said, look, to be honest, I didn't mention names or, single this girl out or anything like that. But I said to the woman, look, we're going the wrong way here. We're going the wrong way. the general public, they don't care if there's women on the crew, gays on the crew, Asians on the crew,
anything.
West Indians on the crew. All they want when they're in trouble is they want the best people to come out and rescue them. So you're anti-woman. I'm not anti-woman at all. At the time, I think Serena Williams was just winning her first Wimbledon. So if you've got a woman like Serena Williams,
I'd have her on my crew any day. I'd have her on my crew. Yeah, absolutely.
She's stronger than me. So it's not a female thing at all.
Yeah,
it's not a race thing. It's nothing. I said, but you're employing people deliberately to tick boxes now, rather than by capability. And her answer was, "Well, she can do the easy job." She can do the easy job.
And that's only around as long as resources allow. At some point in time, that person's going to have to get involved.
Well, I actually told this HR woman, not that she was particularly interested, but I actually said to her, well, the other day we had a house fire and one crew was already out of the skip, so they were on the way, but they weren't on arrival. They weren't there with us. So I said there was 5 of us. So we've got 2 BA. This is before you had like rapid deployment procedures and all the rest of it.
Now there's only 4 of us, mate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I said to her, there's me. I'll be pulling the hose reel off and all the rest of it because there's nobody else to do it. You've got one bloke who's going to probably ship a standpipe if it's a going, goer or whatever. You've got the pump operator. There's me and there's another bloke. No, I'm going to have to do a 360 of the building, blah, blah, blah. Tell me where the easy jobs are.
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned the iron cylinders before. I mean, they were heavy. They were very, very taxing to wear. I was a fit lad. I mean, I did a lot of training outside the job.
Yeah.
We used to have I think it was 40, I can't remember if it was 40 or 45. I think it was 45 where you didn't have to wear BA anymore.
Oh, okay.
They just decided that at that age, it wasn't. So by that age, obviously the older blokes, they were either driving or if they're in the back, they were doing what we used to call hydrant. We used to have 3 positions in the back of a pump, and that was branch, feed, and hydrant. So now it's 2 BAs and an echo or whatever they are. Yeah. The hydrant man, by then, he probably knew the patch inside out. He knew where all the hydrants were without even having to look at the water book. I think these days, people probably don't bother about, I don't know if they do, but they don't seem to bother so much about checking water en route to an incident.
But they use the MDT, so the mobile data terminal on the front tells you where the closest hydrants are. And we look on there and we go, right, do you know where the nearest hydrant is? And if he says no, I'll zoom in and I'll go, right, it's outside number 36 on this street. And then he'll glance it as we approach the incident. Yeah, I've seen it, boss. Yeah, right.
Well, we didn't have a terminal. I mean, like bloody witchcraft. We had water books in the back, and I mean, like as a young lad, on the way back from an incident, Bryn would turn around and say, "Where was the hydrant?" And you couldn't turn around and say, "I don't know." You had to look up where the hydrant was. I noticed in later years, obviously, 2 pumps are pulled up together. That's 800 gallons of water. Obviously, you get a feed in from the backup pump, so that whichever pump's doing got the reels off for us. And our hose reels are going to take a long time to get to 800 gallons. We used to use Dutch rolls. So Dutch rolls, if you've got a good jet on with a Dutch roll, you've got a factory or a garage or something like that, you're going to burn through your water pretty quick.
You ain't got long.
So we always need
4 minutes, maybe.
Fine weather.
Yeah. Right? 4 minutes, maybe. You'll thrash through.
Yeah, that's right. So within that time, you needed a feed-in. So there was no time then. I mean, 3 o'clock in the morning, street lights. There was no time then to be looking in the water book. So en route to the call, you have to sort out where your water was. And your next one, because if you turned up when there was a car parked over the hydrant, if you haven't got enough blokes to sort of like handball it out the way, you've got to find out where your next one. And all these things, these all came under the title of firemanship. People expected you to do these things. And this is what I was talking about earlier, mentors. Like this wasn't stuff that you were taught on the training school. It was just how the watch did stuff. I don't want this to come over in any way critical of the modern crews, but they've just grown up in a different era. You know what I mean? The things that are acted. I mean, there might be things that are asked of crews now that are more extreme than we had to do. I don't know.
No. A lot of what you call firemanship there now falls on the incident commander, to be in all honesty with you. A lot of it becomes more of a leading firefighter role, and it's not always, and there are some great members of the crew, and even of my crew, that will still do this. They're in the back, they're looking through the books, they're referencing, they're chipping in information, chipping in ideas, but a lot of it is down to you now to learn the risk information en route if you haven't been there before, and then just disseminate that as quickly as you can to the rest of the team.
What happens if that goes down?
So we do risk inspections on a regular basis anyway. So every year, each watch will have a risk inspection that they have to go to. But we don't walk the streets anymore. We don't walk the streets looking at hydrants.
What about I'm talking about your gizmo in the front of the pump.
Yeah.
Let's say, for argument's sake, you're out in the county somewhere.
So if that gizmo goes down in certain fire appliances,
yeah.
and I know in ours, we have got an A to Z list of streets and hydrant locations in a folder in the back of the vehicle, but I know it's not mandatory. A lot of places don't have that.
You've still got that backup. Yeah. Regarding, coming back to this thing about diversity and fitness levels and all the rest of it, we got fit doing drill. Yeah. I mean, it does make me laugh. I mean, I know you're big into fitness and all the rest of it. I mean, I know you don't believe it looking at this 65-year-old bloke here, but I was big into fitness as well.
I know. I've heard the stories.
I'll be honest. I used to do too much. I mean, I trained to compete. I competed at like international level, and I did too much. And as you know, there's like a bell curve with fitness where not enough doesn't really help, but too much doesn't help.
Too much stimulation, mate. I've had prolapsed disc in my back. I've torn ligaments and tendons. But, trying to justify it with mental discipline, and actually it was me pushing myself too far. Yeah.
Well, I reached the point. I mean, when I was 31, I had pneumonia. It's quite touch and go, really. And that was down to overtraining. I used to run every morning. I used to have a staffy at the time. I used to go out for like a 3-mile run. I used to be in the gym for a couple of hours in the afternoon. I used to do karate at night, alongside working shifts, poor diet, destructive sleep and all the rest of it. So eventually too much. So when I talked to people at the time about, I mean, I used to talk to people on the watch who didn't do any exercise. Maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. They'd just turn around and laugh and say, well, you look at my fucking sickness record and look at yours. Yours is worse than mine, which was true, because I used to push myself to the point where occasionally I broke, So occasionally I need to have physio for an injured shoulder because I lifted too much or whatever. The bottom line we used to have, I don't know if you've still got it now, is we used to drill at fireground pace, fast pace. So we used to be chucking the kit around. So even the ones who didn't want to do any exercise at all, they were still kept at a level of effectiveness for firefighting because they used to drill at that pace. The last time I went on station years ago, I was talking to a bloke who was in the gym, and they got all the flashy kit and all the rest of it, and they were all wearing shorts, and they were also like trying to compete with each other for the time on the rower and all this sort of stuff, and they were lifting the kettlebells. And I'm a kettlebell coach. I mean, I love doing it. But I was talking to the bloke about, okay, you're doing all your aerobic stuff, you're on your recumbent cycle, and you're doing all this, and I said, that's lovely, that's great, that's a good aerobic base, blah blah blah. But don't you find it's different when you're wearing fire kit? What do you mean? Or when you're wearing kit? As soon as you start putting restrictive clothing on where you can't sweat, you can't breathe properly, you've got a BA set with tight straps, so your lung function's compromised because you can't get that 3-chamber breathing. You're dragging kit, you're not lifting stuff in prescribed movement patterns. Yeah. You're dragging uncooperative kit like hose drills around car wheels and stuff like that. So we didn't do that. We used to go out and drill at a fast pace. And that was our fitness training for firefighting. As you know, I'm not trying to teach you to suck.
No, please do.
But your training's got to be specific to what you want to achieve.
Yep.
There is some overlap. Sure, I mean,
specific
strength is a
adaptation to an imposed demand. That's what I always say. And this is where I love the BFC, British Firefighter Challenge Training has become such a gift for me. It's given me an excuse to train in fire kit rather than just looking like a freak all the time. Yeah,
I mean, that's exactly right. We used to run around in fire kit. Okay, then somebody got a little hurty blister or something like that. So, we better not run in fire kit anymore because somebody might get a little woo-woo. You just think, for fuck's sake, toughen up. And it's the same with banter. I mean, like when you talk about physical strength and mental strength, I think there is an overlap. Regarding banter, I mean, I mentioned on the internet the other day about banter on stations. It used to be cruel. I mean, Stretch Warden got it right because he said this banter would strip the flesh off your bones. But nobody complained. I mean, I used to have a great source called Lou Warrow, and he was a really hard man. He was a tanker. He used to be in the tank corps, I think, in the military.
Yeah.
He was a tough guy. And when somebody said to him about the piss taking, he just said, well, look, if I can't rely on you to handle piss take, how can I rely on you to deal with some of the situations that we have to face? And I think he had a good point. If you're so mentally fragile that somebody saying hurty words is going to knock you off kilter for the rest of the shift, what are you going to do when you have to pick a dead child up?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't mean to say that to be corny.
No, you're not being flippant or anything like that. It's true.
If people, we were always taught that, you didn't have to be sort of like callous or unfeeling. I know some people got that way, but I can't remember when I was in. I can remember a couple of blokes, and it was a real talking point at the time. A couple of blokes went off sick with stress, and it was a real talking point that sort of like, well, it's, firemen don't do stress. What's that all about?
Yeah.
I'm not being disrespectful to them, and I'm not going to name him certainly, but I mean, he suffered. He suffered with stress, and he went off, and he was off for some considerable time. And we were all surprised because the nature of the job meant that you hardened off. Stress didn't really get you. Not at least not publicly. You didn't publicly admit it. I mean, nobody likes going out to burnt children or dismembered bodies or anything like that. I mean, you're a bloody freak if you enjoy it. But nobody came home and really sort of like, or came back to the station and really sort of, you didn't see anybody sitting in the corner sucking their thumb, shaking or anything like that. And it never seemed to get to people. I noticed now with the charity, I mean, like years ago, the charity used to be virtually 100% about physical injuries.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the ratio is now. I think it's maybe 50-50 where it's physical and stress-related.
I think there's a lot of things in the mix in that one, because I also think as watch cultures have become not as close and they've become less honest and less, there's less banter and there's less encouragement, less wins, less failures, they're happening together. The watch culture's become a bit weaker, which I think is probably a correlating trend with how much more people are struggling to deal with some of the stresses of the job. And there are some tremendous stresses of the job, but a rich watch culture often allowed a very much needed pressure release valve on that stress, which I don't think we've found. Whilst we've sort of thrown the baby out of the bathwater, because we've thrown out some of the watch culture, because it did come at times with a little bit of bullying, which certainly needed addressing, but I think we've done a bit too much of a recalibration sometimes, and as a result, people find it hard to speak about things that would have come out naturally in the banter of a strong watch culture, and they're not finding a release for it anymore.
I agree 100% what you're saying. I mean, I have witnessed bullying. I've been on the wrong end of it. Not too proud to admit it. When I joined, there was a bloke on B section, and his favourite trick was to smack you right in the middle of your spine as hard as he possibly could, then go, "You're right." I know you can edit that out, so I don't want to say, "You're right." Bang! And I was about 8.5 stone, he was about 15 stone, so it really, really come keen. I sorted it out because he did it to me once, and I turned around and kneed him straight in the bollocks. I just thought, have some of that. If you want to do violence, I can do that. I quite enjoy it. And he was so, can't you take a joke? So, well, if you want to get physical, I can do that. I can do that every day of the week. Let's go for it. Come on, sort it. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody's got the tools to do it. Not everybody's got the mindset to do it.
And they shouldn't have to do it as well. In those I'm all for a bit of thickening people's skin and all that sort of stuff. But stuff like that is just blatant. And I get he came up in a different culture and maybe that was the behaviour in his household. But you can really hurt people when you're doing that sort of stupidity.
Yeah. I mean, there was one lad on the watch I was with. I mean, I was about 10.5 stone, but this lad was smaller than me. And he suffered terribly with this bloke hitting him. So, I mean, I think I did him a favour as well.
Yeah.
But I turned around to the bloke and obviously give him some back. And I don't remember him doing it again after that. Now, that sort of thing is totally wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. What I'm talking about is when you go out to an incident, I mean, I've picked heads up, I've dealt with, bodies with massive burns, and like you try and pick them up, and it's all bloody waxy and greasy. Yeah. I've seen all the horrible stuff.
Well.
I'm not.
Stinks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people talk about sights you can't unsee, but they don't talk about sounds you can't unhear and smells you can't unsmell. I mean, the smell of burnt bloody bacon, basically. The smell of burnt flesh. We had a spacer where there was quite a lot of Asian women setting fire to themselves. There might have been other reasons, but I don't want to really go down that route. As far as the police were concerned, it'd been a tragic accident. But you go out to women with 90% burns. I mean, the survivability. It might be a lot better now, but at the time we used to rule, 100 minus your age. So if it's a 70-year-old woman, if she's got more than 30% burns, forget it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If you've got a 20-year-old woman who's got 70% burns, she's got a chance. But we used to go out to quite a few of these, and it's very unpleasant. You come back, you can't get the smell out of your nostrils, and everybody's a bit sort of like this, and especially if you had to wait and watch them die. I mean, we did that on a couple of occasions. I mean, the ambulance crew turned out. They just thought, well, why put her through all the trauma of even loading her on the ambulance? she's going to go. The airway's closing up, all the flames have gone down her throat. They can see that, the throat's closing. She's going to go. So, I mean, that's not pleasant. For any normal person, watching somebody die in that sort of pain is not right. Standard procedure, cooling water. So, obviously, hose reel off the appliance, very light trickle of water, just if you can, just try and give them some degree of comfort. And then basically watch them go. Not nice. You come back to the station, human beings, we've all got grandmas about the same age or whatever. But at some point, at some trigger point, somebody cracks a joke.
You've got to break that black ice.
And then all of a sudden the spell's broken, And then you're back into it and everybody's taking the piss. And
you've got to carry on.
Do it.
So you need to roll. The pumps need to go out the next day.
Yeah, I mean, a big term now in fitness, mental and physical, is resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from trauma, hardship, whatever. I've been on station and wore 3 BA sets in one night, 3 house fires in one night. So if the first one's fatal and you're sitting there because you're a bit upset and you need a safe space and all the rest of it, and again, I'm using these terms in a derogatory sort of way, but you couldn't do that, because the next time the bells go down, you've got to go and you've got to perform, and the next time it might be somebody who is savable. So you've got to be on your A game. You can't be feeling sorry for yourself. So we always found the easiest way to get people back to where they should be is, 1, a cup of tea, because that's always a winner on a fire station. 2, somebody would get a pan out, and I was lucky to work with some really good I was always a crap bloody chef, but I mean, sooner or later, somebody's rustled something up.
You've got to, mate. A watch marches on its stomach, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. But by the time you've cleaned the kit, got the machine back on the run, cleaned yourself, swap your fire kit over if this kit stinks or whatever, got yourself upstairs, got a brew down your neck, got some food down you, talked through the job, this went well, wherever. And the officers I had, the station officers I had, I mean, I don't know what the equivalent title now, but we used to have station officers in charge of a watch. They were very good. They were like a father figure in a way.
Yeah.
They'd sort of they'd keep an eye out. They'd see if somebody was a bit quiet, not really, getting involved in the conversation or whatever. They'd perhaps have a quiet word with you afterwards. You okay? All this sort of stuff. But that's how they did it. And I think a lot of that's been lost now. Well, we had a rider station officer, so it's like the watch manager. At the time, there was 22 blokes on the watch. It's a big watch. I mean, that's half your fire now, isn't it? But there's 22 blokes on the watch. What is there, 9 now? Again, going back to the 70s, we had 2 pumps, HP and TL cross-manned, ET and FST usually cross-manned. So you'd have at least 13 on. Usually 15 was the minimum, but by permission from the senior officer, it could go down to 13, I believe. But normally we rode with 15. So there are 22 on a watch, and 7 could be off for leave, training or whatever. Coming back to the stress thing, I mean, I did a lot of research. I mean, I'm not well qualified, but I'm well read about stress, PTSD. The other side to it is what's called post-traumatic growth.
Love it. That's where I live.
Yeah, some people, they go out to a traumatic event, it plays on their mind, they have nightmares, all the rest of it. Other people learn from it, they grow from it. It makes them mentally tougher.
And you've got to want to find the benefit in it, because you're all going to have to go through those things as operational personnel. But that's ultimately, you've got to ask yourself, am I just going through this, or am I going to grow through it? What can I take away from this? How can this make me more mentally tough, more resilient? What wins can I take from it?
Yeah, but my point really is that I had to do all this research in my own time. It should be part of the culture. It should be part of, not just the physical training. I don't know what the physical training is like on your station now, but as well as doing physical training, we used to do drill every day, like I mentioned earlier. It didn't matter what the weather was and all the rest of it. Nights as well, we used to do drill from 6:30 till 7:30. Then we used to have technical lectures. I don't know what the procedure is now. The technical lectures, though, would be like, okay, we've got a new bit of kit, let's get up in the quiet room, let's take it to bits, put it together, this is how you use it. We never had any training at all on dealing with trauma. It was just the elephant in the room. Nobody ever told us how to deal with trauma. What we did, because of the watch culture, I mean, we used to have a rec room without a bar. I mean, sometimes it was abused and eventually it was closed. But we used to have a big gas fire. And we used to have a big long table in the rec room and everybody used to sit around swapping stories and all the rest of it, talking about. And that's how you mentally...
processed it.
You grew. You understood the job. The only time I remember anybody, bloke I used to work with, he mentioned the same thing, probably at a different time. I can remember one particularly really, really shitty, horrible job. a DO poked his head round the door of the quiet room and said, "Right, lads, does anybody need any counselling?" Now, everybody's going to put their hand up and say, me. No, nobody's going to. But it shouldn't be down to individuals going and seeking help. It should be part of the training culture. Now the science is there. I mean, at the time, I mentioned my father a while ago. My father was ex-military, he served in Korea, Royal Marines. He was on small boat teams, which I suppose, similar to what the SBS does now. They used to canoe in up inlets, blow up bridges to stop the advancing North Korean army and all the rest of it. Small boat squads. He saw some horrible things. He killed people. He quite matter of fact about removing sentries and God knows what. And he also saw a lot of cruelty with the civilian population. And he had PTSD, there's no doubt about it, but at the time, nobody diagnosed it. He was a Royal Marine, he was a rough, tough, air-ass Royal Marine. So nobody mentioned trauma and the effect on the brain and all the rest of it. So as a child, I lived with that, because my father had really, really unpredictable moods and all the rest of it. Sometimes he was really helpful, really great. Other times he'd fly off the handle. And classic PTSD symptoms, Some things would trigger him for no reason at all. Now, I can remember as a child, I had a sister, obviously my mother, we suffered that. Now, no firefighter's family should have to suffer. No. Say, they really shouldn't. This
and
is something,
they are doing it as well. They are suffering that.
I'm not in a position to influence that one way or the other, but now the science is out there. Now everybody understands PTSD and how it goes.
The science is there, really, mate, and we've started to give it lip service, I would say. We've done courses. I'm a TRIM practitioner, so trauma incident management. I do that in the service, but it's very much a guidance and referral role. You know what I mean? We signpost people to other services, and we've just started sprouting the roots of intention, and we need to take more action on it. I know there's an appetite for it. That appetite needs to be more than just an appetite. We need to be taking actions towards it now. I'm super conscious of time, Gaz, is the only thing. But I wanted to close quickly. If I could force you into 3 non-negotiable behaviors, characteristics that people in and around you must subscribe to. You think whilst your time in the fire service, what are those 3 characteristics that you would demand people adopt and be part of in order to exist in this idea of the fire service that we described?
A willingness to prepare.
Roger that.
A willingness to prepare. You get the odd person, I've been in 25 years, I don't need to pitch a lake on, blah, blah, blah. And I used to say to them, again, another martial arts expression, you're only as good as your last fight. You're only as good as your last fight. You're only as good as the last time you pitched a lake on. If you've not pitched a lake on for 12 months, don't expect to do it efficiently at 3 o'clock in the morning. So a willingness to prepare.
100%.
A willingness to step up. Yeah. Now, I've been to fires, I'm sure you have. I've been to fires where there's a horrible job to be done. Horrible. And you shouldn't have to look at the first bloke who sort of like looks away, look at the next one who looks away, look at the next one who conveniently finds something and he's putting back on the appliance, look at the next one until eventually you find somebody who is prepared to pick up that burnt body, for argument's sake. Everybody on the crew, to me, should be prepared to step up.
Yeah.
So if the ladder's pitched and they're looking for somebody to go up it, they shouldn't see a lot of faces that sort of like, no, I don't want to do that. Everybody ought to be capable.
Whoever stood closest to the foot of the ladder, start climbing it.
Yeah, that's right. A willingness to step up. You do face danger. I don't want to overstate it. Gravity is ever present. Going aloft, gravity and concrete's not a good mix. Going into fires, flashover, backdraft, no collapsing floors, as I mentioned earlier, you do face danger. You don't want anybody who's in the job, in my opinion, under false pretenses. If they've not got the bollocks to actually go in and do dangerous stuff, you've got to question while they're there. I forget what his name is. I think it's Charles Schultz, the bloke who did Peanuts. He put down something. Recruit, character, train, skill.
Yes.
So
to train character is almost impossible, isn't it? I'd rather have somebody with a desire to improve and develop than somebody that wanders in with a skill set and a diploma and whatever, but has not got that growth mindset.
Yeah. Growth mindset, that's brilliant. You've got to believe that if you train hard enough, you can raise your level, raise your game. And
100%.
It's the same in the gym, the dojo, and certainly on the drill yard. You've got to believe that. So a willingness to prepare, a willingness to step up. And the other thing as well, I think, I'll come back to this, is to have a fucking sense of humour.
Absolutely.
You really have.
Don't take yourself too seriously.
You've got to be able to laugh at the bizarre, because otherwise you really would go nuts. And when I say nuts, you can't use the term nuts now because it seems very disrespectful to people with a genuine problem. But you've got to have a sense of humour, and I think the sense of humour will carry you through tough times. It'll make your bonds closer with your watchmates. You know, you don't have to be a stand-up comic, but you've got to be able to sort of like look at situations and basically not take yourself too seriously. If you're too far up your own arse, you know, like people won't really.
I think the sense of humour and that banter is like I've said it before, that pressure release valve. You've got to be able to have a laugh.
Yeah.
Don't take yourself too seriously, otherwise you will find yourself in a very, very serious place if you take yourself too seriously for too long, and that never ends well for anybody.
No, that's right. So that would be my three. If I was going to design a fireman from scratch, firefighter, whichever term you want to use, I always use the term fireman because I was taken on as a fireman. I know it changed later, but if I was going to design somebody from scratch, the first thing I'd do, right, are they enthusiastic? Are they prepared to train? Are they prepared to learn and master their craft? And it is a craft. You know, people talk about it now as if it's just a job. It's not. It's a craft. Just like being a good engineer, you've got to pay attention to detail. A good carpenter, you've got to pay attention to. You want to be a good fireman, you've got to pay it. You've got to learn your craft. So the willingness to prepare and the willingness to step up. Now, as you said, character, that you can't beat character into somebody, but you should find out before you go down the route of putting them on a 13-week training school or the continuation training and all the rest of it. I think with some people, I think the job was almost embarrassed to turn around and say, you know what, we've made a mistake here. We've got to let them go. Yeah. They took people on. Certainly, I can remember, I'm not going to name names, but I can remember them taking people on, and it just didn't work. They either weren't bright enough, they weren't enthusiastic enough, but they ticked a box. You know what I'm saying? They ticked a box. And the brigade, although these people, some of them were disruptive, some of them they just couldn't fit into watch culture. The brigade was sort of too embarrassed to say, you know what, we tried, we gave you the opportunity, you didn't take it. Let's go and work somewhere else, you know. So they kept people on that really shouldn't have. So the willingness to step up, courage is the ability to control fear. I learned courage quite early on because I'll be honest with you, I hate heights. I always did. I spent 31 years controlling that fear. Yeah. I volunteered for a high reach rescue squad. I think it's all under tech rescue now. We trained. We used to go up bloody cranes and God knows what. And I hated it, but I wanted to do it because I wanted to keep practicing that controlling fear. Yeah. And if you've got people who sort of like, I'm afraid of something, I'm not going to do it, you've got to question why they're in a rescue service. Perhaps they should have done a different job.
That's okay.
Because there will be times where you've got to, everybody else is going that way, and your crew manager turns around to you and says, right, you two you're going that way. Yeah. You know, if you've got somebody who's looking for a toilet at the time or shaking like a leaf, that's just not good. And like I say, last thing, I know I'm rabbiting a bit, but last thing, have a sense of humour. Yeah. Take the job seriously. Once you roll out the doors, professional, spot on, but back on station. Have a laugh. If one thing the rescue services should teach us is that life is not promised. You know, it can end violently very soon. I mean, families go out for a day trip, they hit a truck, they're all gone. It can. So why people want to spend their life on a station being miserable just surprises me, you know. So just have a laugh. Well, not be cruel to each other. You know, that those days are gone. But enjoy each other's company and support each other, you know. Well,
I think anybody that's struggling with a sense of humour will certainly have been given it from our conversation today and with all of your contributions, mate. I love your honesty, and I really thank you for giving that injection of reality that I think has been sorely missed. I'm the serial optimist, so my hope is that with the existence of things like the podcast and with the honesty of guests such as yourself, we can hopefully bring a little bit of that back and pour some more into the cocktail. I will put everything in the notes for us, mate, and a reminder for everybody that your book still can get it available. Donations to the Firefighters charity, get in contact with yourself. All of your contact details will be down there as well. And I really appreciate your time today, brother.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Good to speak to you.
Take care, mate. And there you have it, folks. That was my fantastic, colourful conversation with the fantastic Gary Chamberlain. As I said right at the beginning of the episode, Gary is a published author, and details of his books and also the Firefighters charity, which are mentioned in there. Gary's always doing little stuff for charity, so take a look at the links below. You'll be able to click through there. You'll have Gary's email address. You'll be able to get hold of his book, 1000 Degrees at the Ceiling, Life on the Thin Red Line. Gary's only sending this to people which are willing to give a donation to the Firefighters charity, who help operational firefighters past and present and their families all over the world, but more specifically in the UK. You'll also find links to some of the Firefighter podcast platforms. Be sure to check in there, where you'll find a whole bunch of mini sound bites to give you a little taster, a little nugget of all of our episodes that are out there at the minute. We are really cranking the dial, rapidly approaching 80 episodes, so plenty of incredible guests have been on the podcast, and you can take a sample from all of those on our Instagram page, on our Facebook page, and also on our YouTube page. I think it's important to mention that Gary was in the fire service for a very, very long time, but he has left the fire service a very, very long time ago as well. Gary was on here today representing himself, his own thoughts, his own feelings, his own reflections, his own memories, the good, the bad, and the ugly from his time in the fire service in the UK. But his thoughts, opinions, values are those of him, and of course many of which do not reflect the values, opinions, and thoughts of fire services currently operating out there. My hope is they've still got a few of them, and I can say as an operational firefighter in the UK that many of the good things Gary speaks of are still in existence. We're still empowering people. We're still enjoying it. People aren't taking themselves too seriously. We've got a tremendously resourceful, diverse, and passionate fire service all over the UK. There's always a few bad apples, and I'm not sure we'll ever fix that. But my sincere hope, again as that serial optimist, is that we can simply overwhelm them with our positivity. And I really feel privileged to act as a funnel to allow people to share their own personal, true feelings, true opinions, unfiltered from their time in the emergency services. This episode, alongside Gary's books, is a little bit like a times capsule, which will hopefully allow us to reflect back on that time in the fire service, and hopefully think that we've come a long way. Hopefully we've took some of the good things with us, and hopefully we've changed to better reflect the ideals, the priorities, the values, the morals, the culture of the communities that we serve today, because the cultures have changed a lot as well. So with all that in mind, all that's left to say is thank you to you, the listener. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for dropping in. Thanks for giving us your time. It's been a pleasure. Hope you've enjoyed it. And let's not go too long before we speak again. Who knows who's coming up next? Well, I do. And I'll tell you what, there are some absolutely fantastic guests coming along. So I'll leave you as the optimist and say I can't wait to see you again real soon, right here on the Firefighters Podcast.